mean, this is what we're talking about tonight. Funnily enough, is kind of an example of this because I hesitate to say that I'm part of the Transformers collecting community, but I kind of was for a while, you know?
Yeah.
And I've made a lot of really, really good friends through it. Like, really good friends. Some of my best friends derive from that experience, you know? They really do. I mean, as many of you out there will probably know, it was supposed to be TF Nation last weekend. The UK's Transformers convention, which I've been going to since 2009. Largely because of the people. I've met so many people through it who I'm so close to now. Like, some of my very, 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 very best friends are from that environment. I'm not as into it as I was, you know. It's little bits and pieces now. But I missed, obviously for reasons, the convention itself didn't go ahead this time round.
Of course, yeah.
Of course. I mean, it's bad enough. You know, conventions generally are bad enough, aren't they, for health? You know, you know of the con crud, yeah?
It's like being on a plane, isn't it? You always end up with something.
Well, you know, I mean, the circumstances. You've got loads of different people all milling about together. There's often a lack of sleep, a lack of nutrition. You're often drinking heavily. And you just, obviously, you're going to catch something. And after TF Nation, a few days later, usually you get something. We call it the con crud, you know? And it's like a cold, you know, it's like a flu-y thing. It makes you feel terrible. But obviously, under present circumstances, it would be a very bad idea.
Yes,
for obvious reasons. That said, there's you know, a lot of people are really sad about it, myself included. It is sad. I mean, this is the first year since 2009 that I haven't seen these people, and a lot of these people, I only get to see them there because they live far away, or because, you know, we're busy or whatever. So it is kind of sad, I've got to say. You know what's really weird? Really weird. Laura Marrow. We were one of the first chats we had. We were chatting about all this. I think it was one of our She-Ra videos. I was chatting about like Transformers and TF Nation and whatnot. She happened to mention that her partner is a Transformers fan, and she kind of dabbles in it. You know, she's read some of the later comics and whatnot.
Sure, yeah.
And it turns out, before we ever spoke or kind of met or whatever, she was there and I was there. We were both at TF Nation.
Oh, nice.
And I saw her. She was in she did one of the cosplays. She went as Brainstorm, and it was brilliant. It was this amazing costume. And I saw that costume, you know, I remember seeing it and remarking on how good it was. So
I had a funny thing like that
so
with my actual partner.
Yeah.
She a few years ago, it's not been on for a while now, but Sheffield used to be home to what was commonly referred to as like the biggest Halloween carnival in the UK.
Right.
They used to do it every year. It was called Fright Night. They'd block off all the city centre and have massive rides and decorations, and you'd have things like they designate whole streets as like zombie assault alleys and all that kind of thing. They stopped doing it because the council just charged more and more every year, and to the point where it became untenable.
Yeah.
But it's that stupid thing in it where you've got a good thing here, don't get greedy because then you'll have nothing.
Then you'll have
but
nothing.
that's what councils do, isn't it?
Mm.
So we don't get it anymore. But one year, and I used to go to it with a few of my friends, and one year I went as Rorschach from The Watchmen.
Right.
And costume-wise, it looked fucking brilliant when I look on pictures of it now. Hideous to wear because you can barely see through that mask.
Oh, yeah, breathing and whatnot, yeah.
I had one of them masks that when you breathe, it changes the colour of it.
Oh, cool.
So it kept going like black and white in different parts, so it looked like it was moving.
That's right.
That's the only way you can get a moving Rorschach mask, really, without paying thousands and thousands. There's one that's like micro beads that all move around with the move, but that's, you know, you're talking insane money there. But I just had this one that changed with the breeding. And my girlfriend, who's considerably younger than me, she was there that night with some of her friends, and when we first met and we were talking about Fright Night and stuff, because we went to it together once we got together, she happened to mention, we were watching the Watchmen film together, and she said, I once saw someone dressed as him at Fright Night, and she described the other characters he was with, and I was like, yeah, that was
you. Yeah, it's so weird, isn't it? It's so strange.
It's funny, isn't it? I've had that encounter and you don't even realise.
Those weird kind of little coincidences. It is strange. But yeah, so we're all missing. All of us are kind of aching for a bit of like Transformers input, you know. And people who have watched this channel for a long time, because I started doing some of the first videos I ever did on the Exaggerated Elegy channel were Transformers reviews. I used to do, yeah, that's how I got into it. That's how the community came together, you know. There was this 2009 was the weirdest year because YouTube was kind of just starting to pick up around then. It wasn't the same as it is now. It was a different thing. And the Transformers collecting community, certainly the UK Transformers collecting community, became really close. There was like this crop of people who, myself included, who just sort of like latched onto one another, got to know one another. And when we met up at what was then Auto Assembly, it was called Auto Assembly back then, it was the best time. It was brilliant. And since then, we've just kept going, you know? And I've kind of like developed like lifelong friendships from that. Some of my very best friends, the people I see most regularly, are from that experience now. So missing it this year was a bit of a kick, to be honest. And a lot of people, for a lot of people, it is the thing they look forward to the most. There's no doubt of it. I mean, it's like their Christmas, you know? It's the experience that they look forward to the most. It's the most social thing they do. It is like the big event of the year. And of course, it just didn't happen this year. So it was a bit of a blow. It was a bit of a blow to people. So we were all getting a little bit maudlin, a little bit nostalgic. I've sort of been since the new Transformers series came out, Earthrise, I've been picking up bits and pieces. I got the new Scorponok, for example, the big one, who's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, he's good, that.
Oh, he's so cool. I tell you what, he's bigger than I thought he was going to be. A little bit bigger than I thought. He is.
How long does it take to transform it?
Not that long, actually. He's big, but he's not that complex. You can figure him out. I never use the instructions. He's quite easy to figure out. And marginally more complex than the G1. But only marginally. Only marginally. It's a very nice update, you know. I've picked up a few other bits and pieces as well. I'm awaiting on the Earthrise Snapdragon, and I think I ordered the Titans Return Galvatron as well recently. So I'm kind of in the mood, you know. I'm kind of in the mood for a little bit of Transformers. And then you were talking to me about Transformers the movie, which, by the way, ladies and gents, you kind of have to be a certain age to get this. And we're not talking about the Michael Bay films because we're never, ever, ever, ever talking about them.
Although Bumblebee's all right.
Yeah, Bumblebee's fine, isn't it? It's actually quite fun.
The opening 10 minutes of that is better than all the Michael Bay films put together.
Yeah, it so is. And in just purely cinematic terms, just leave aside Transformers fandom, and just objectively, as a piece of cinema, the Bumblebee movie is just better put together.
Do you know what, though? Just such a sensible decision to set it in the 80s.
Right, yeah.
Because Transformers is such an 80s thing. Yeah. You just think of it as being connected to like you said, those of us of a certain age who actually grew up with the original iteration of it. Yeah. Why not set it in the 80s? It just makes so much sense.
Well, it means you can do some of the original designs, doesn't it? It means you can do stuff you could potentially have Soundwave as a cassette player. You could have Starscream in his jet form and Optimus in his big rig mode, you know, his tractor trailer mode rather. But yeah, oh god, I mean, the Michael Bay films, I have a very complex relationship with them because I hate them to bits. But I don't hate them as a Transformers fan, if that makes sense.
They did reinvigorate that franchise and brought more money and popularity to it than it would have had without them. You've got to give it that.
Absolutely. And they've ensured that it has sustained to this day.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
My problem with them is not that they don't reflect the franchise correctly or anything like that. My problem with them is that they are crap cinema.
They're not good films. They're not even good films. The stories just don't. There's not even any continuity. Can't even say that word. Continuity between the films. Nah, there's stuff that's just forgotten and doesn't make sense and jumps about, and you can't even watch them as a standalone. Okay, we'll just focus on these because it doesn't work.
It doesn't. No, I mean, the excuse I often hear is, oh well, they're just brainless action films, and I'm like, well, no, there are good brainless action films.
Yeah, because look at the Fast and the Furious film.
Right.
That's a brainless action film, but they're actually good films. They actually make sense. Yes. They actually follow on. There's consistency of narrative.
That's it. And you can see what's happening. So the action set pieces are well shot and well framed, whereas in the Michael Bay Transformers films, it's not.
No, everything's just bashing together, isn't it? Right. It's the equivalent of kids with toys just bashing them together.
Right.
You can't really see what's happening.
I still say to this day, the ideal format for a Transformers like film or a visual media is going to be animated. It's going to be a cartoon of some description, and that may be because of my biases, because of course, like yourself, kind of grew up with the original Transformers cartoon, with the original movie, then moved on to the other cartoons, all of which are most of which are quite good. I mean, Beast Wars is actually my favorite of all of them. I love Beast Wars and Beast Machines. Those are superb cartoons. But the original movie is this is where it's going to get really difficult to explain to people who were not around at the time, because the original movie was an event for most people, wasn't it?
The movie was my sort of way into the Transformers.
Yeah,
I was bought that on VHS. There was a video shop we used to go to, and you could rent them. That was a thing. That's a date. Been putting a date on. Right. It's a rent a VHS.
VHS, what's that, Lex? What the hell are you talking about?
You could buy them as well from this shop, and I believe. One of my friends at school's mum, who knew my mum, had bought that film for their son, who was about 4 or 5 at that point, and so was I, and had said, you should get him this, it's really good.
Right.
So my mum bought him it, and I watched it, and just totally fell in love with it. I'll just detail why before we explain the film and talk about it. But the music, the animation of it, I like the characters. I like the fact that, unlike every other 80s franchise, I like the fact that the good guys are very much underpowered compared to the villains. Usually you get, like, say, with He-Man, the cartoon, no matter what Skeletor throws at him, 2 punches and He-Man's done with it. Whereas in Transformers Generation 1, particularly in the film, you very much get the idea that these guys are vastly overpowered compared to the good guys. The Decepticons, they're the soldiers, they're the warriors. The good guys are just, you can tell by what they turn into. The good guys are like a car or a jeep or whatever. The bad guys, it's a tank.
It's military, isn't it? Yeah.
These are the tough lads. This is the good guys are basically refugees, just desperately trying to get the fuck away from them.
That kind of ties into the film itself, doesn't it? Because at the beginning of the film, the Decepticons have kind of won, haven't they?
Well, that's the other thing you see. I love the fact that there was legitimate threat. They genuinely, and the music and everything about it, I just fell in love with it. And I watched it so many times that there were certain bits where the tape would sort of warp a little bit.
Yeah, this again, guys, you've got to understand how VHS works to get this. So, but
at the top of the screen, it looked like it was pulling a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'd watched it so many times that when I got it on DVD, I was still kind of expecting those scenes to be warped because, do you know what I mean?
I know
exactly. It's like if you've got a cassette of an album that you listen to a lot and it jumps on a particular song, when you get it on CD and it doesn't do that, it kind of surprises you.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, this film, I kind of like you. I was too young to see it at the cinema because it was at the cinema. I didn't even know it was until much later on. I had no idea it was that big a thing, For me, I got it. I can't remember what Christmas it was, but I'd usually have as a stocking filler, there'd be a Transformers, there'd be an annual, and there'd be a VHS of some description. So I think the first one I got was a couple of episodes as Fight or Flee and Call of the Primitives from the 3rd season, and I cannot remember the Christmas it was, but the movie VHS was one of those stocking fillers, and I watched it on Christmas Day.
Cool.
And because I'd been used to the G1 cartoon up until that point, the movie was it remains something else, because obviously the animation's way better. The voice
acting, the actual voice actors,
everything is ramped up to the power of N within the movie. So it kind of blows your mind a little bit. You've got that soundtrack, which is all this very 80s, very bombastic, stad rock stuff.
I've got that soundtrack on vinyl. final.
So have I. You know, it's so yeah. It's like, again, I imagine a lot of people who were not around, who were not kids at the time, who kind of don't get the context of it, will come to this film, and they'll find it, like, the love of it kind of baffling, because it is bombastic and ridiculous. And yeah, I mean, like all the media of the era that was aimed at kids, there are errors, there are problems, you know, totally there are, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You kind of, like, it's an artifact of childhood, isn't it? You know,
what's something I noticed about it, which I've read about this, I don't know how true this is, but apparently the guys who wrote the story for the film only agreed to do so on the basis that it will be given a PG rating and not a U, so that they could actually put legitimate threat in it and legitimate deaths, and that they could tell a proper story with the genuine stuff that happens that matters, rather than like a cartoon where everything's magically reset at the end. I think you can feel that when you watch it. It feels like a legitimate film.
I think one of the things that a lot of kids of the era were probably quite shocked by was the fact that people die in this film.
Opening sequence, like, not the opening sequence, but very near the beginning, the Decepticons launch an attack on the Autobots, they steal one of their dropships, and just fucking murder half of this cast.
Murder. You know what? I think that may have been the scene that kind of gave kids the tone, because the ones that are murdered, obviously, are the old toy line, so they are the characters that kids of the era had gotten used to over the first two seasons of the cartoon. So it's your Ratchet, it's your, it's your Prowl, it's your Brawn, it's the characters that people know, you know?
Yeah, but it's like, you always think, oh, Megatron's here, and you think, oh, there's no way they're going to be able to fight him. How are they getting out of this? And then they don't.
They don't, yeah. For the first time ever, by the way, because obviously in the cartoon, they get blasted all the time, they get destroyed all the time, and they just get put back together. Because you can't really have that in a cartoon, in a kid's cartoon. Not the era you couldn't. Certainly not in the UK you couldn't. There was a massive crackdown and censorship on kids' cartoons in the 1980s. I mean, to the point whereby the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were renamed the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Yeah, but they still use ninja weapons and stuff. So it's like, we can show that, but you can't hear the word ninja.
But a lot of the scenes that other countries got were censored in our version.
Yeah.
So any instance where Michelangelo used his nunchucks like, on anyone were just gone. They were just cut out, basically. There was an odd thing going on at the time, but within the context of cinema, as long as it had like a PG rating, they got away with it. And of course, I mean, like, there's also a corporate thing going on here as well. The whole point of the movie was to reinvigorate the franchise so they could move it on to the next toy line.
Yeah. Kill off half the original characters, bring in some new ones.
Bring in the new ones. That was the whole point.
But it was a brilliant way of doing it. The way they did it is fantastic.
Absolutely. I mean, they actually injected proper drama into it. And, I mean, the writers have said, actually, that they had certainly Hasbro, the initiative to kill Optimus came from Hasbro, and because they wanted to get rid of him, because they had the all-new leaders coming in. They had Ultra Magnus, they had Rodimus Prime, so they had to get these other toys on the shelves, They did not know that doing that would be, like, traumatic to a whole generation.
The way they do that scene, though, right from the outset, where Megatron's just slaughtering the Autobots, and Optimus says, I've got to stop him. Mm-hmm. But you can tell that he knows he ain't going to win this.
Yeah.
Because one-on-one is not a match for him, and he knows he's not. Mm-hmm. And you can tell that he knows that, but he goes to fight him anyway. And that just gives that scene so much pathos.
It's good.
Because it's like, he knows he's going to fucking die doing this, but he does it anyway because he's Optimus Prime. And that just matters. That just makes it hit so much harder, I thought.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember the first viewing of it. I distinctly remember sitting amongst the ruins of, like, all my Christmas presents, and watching this thing, and just being absolutely, like, exhilarated by it. And
it's a legitimate fight, though, isn't it? It's really brutal.
They go for it. Yeah, there are not many, even in the eras since, because of course now the cartoons can do a lot more. They can get away with a lot more. They can portray a lot more. There haven't been many fights that have been that brutal. There's a couple in Beast Wars that are pretty bad, pretty brutal, and are pretty violent. Certainly towards the end, there's a fight between two characters, Depth Charge and Rampage, that's really, really brutal. There's a character called Dinobot who ends up getting like slaughtered by the Predacons, who are sort of like the Decepticons' descendants.
Yeah.
But there aren't many that are that brutal, because you can see all, like, it's something you never got in the original cartoon. Obviously, all these cracks and like
Yeah, I love that. The damage, the
of-
battle damage, and the burns, and the energy crackling underneath, which was like
looks so
symbolic of
good.
like blood coming out, wasn't it? And
I mean, again, if you want to, if you're gonna be like hypercritical, then like there, if you watch the first 2 seasons of the G1 cartoon, Prime survives way worse than that. Prime is literally blown apart in a couple of the episodes, and they just put him back together. Even within the context of the film, like Ultra Magnus later on is completely blown up. Like there's nothing left of him, and the Junkions just put him back together.
they put him back together, and that's fine. Yeah,
and it's fine. But that it's something. It's something like you let it go for this film, because it's so much fun, and it's got this kind of slightly stad rock music video thing going on about it, where you just let it go. There's a lot of weird, wacky imagery that doesn't really make sense. Like when that aside, when Cup and Hot Rod crash on Quintessa.
Yeah.
With the Quintessons. Where the fuck... You watch it now, as a kid you just accept it, because that's just the way it happens, yeah? You watch it as an adult and you're like, where did that come from? What is that about?
Yeah, it's a very strange sort of sidebar. I always sort of took it as sort of like the hero's journey thing to justify Hot Rod then becoming the next Prime.
Yeah, because he does kind of like... He kind of comes of age on Quintessa.
And he justifies himself sort of to Cup, who previously would have thought he was this like reckless idiot.
It's just the weirdness of Quintessa that I like. The fact that
Quintessa feels like it could have been in a different franchise.
Oh, totally. It's got it's for those who don't know, Quintessa's this weird planet that's like it's shaped in this odd, strange, very non-planet-like way, and it's oceanic largely, isn't it?
It's oceanic. It's ruled by this like tentacled, multi-headed judge thing.
The Quintessons, which are just like, they are explained later on in like the 3rd season where they come from and what they are to the Transformers. I mean, in the cartoon, they are actually the Transformers creators.
Oh, nice.
The Quintessons are actually the creators and the original owners of Cybertron in the cartoon. And you know what you were saying earlier about how the Decepticons are the military hardware and the Autobots aren't? That's exactly true. That's why you've got the Autobots and the Decepticons. The Decepticons were the military application hardware, and the Autobots were the domestic products of the Quintessons. But that's not explained in the film. I don't even know if it was a concept when they wrote the film. It probably wasn't.
Is it ever explained why they've kind of flipped the meaning of innocent and guilty in their trial?
No, it's just I
figured there was a meaning behind that, but I've never quite figured out. So like the judging, just to explain, this 3-headed thing is judging like robots that are on trial, and he says innocent and then they die. I wondered if that was some weird sort of, like with the witch trials, like they dunk you underwater, and if you were innocent you'd drown but if you were guilty you'd I wonder if it was some weird bullshit like that, but I've never quite figured it out.
I think what it's supposed to show is just how twisted the Quintessons are. That if you're innocent, then they're going to kill you. Yeah, I think it's supposed to. It's a way of demonstrating how hyper evil the Quintessons are.
Yeah,
because the Quintessons, like through the 3rd season, the Quintessons are like they are the arch enemies of the Transformers. Even the Decepticons hate them. They're much more of a threat to the whole Transformers race than anything else. So I think that's what it's setting up.
Yeah.
But in the context of the film, it's like. It's just there. It's just, they declare you innocent and you die. That's just the way it is. But I kind of love it. There's just it's just absurd weirdness. Also, this film. I don't know. I don't think the previous seasons of Transformers set it up this strongly, but this film really expands like the universe of the Transformers. So there are just these whole other planets out there beyond Cybertron that have got Transformer robots on.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of expands the universe.
Right. It's like, all right, fine. So there are now like Sharkticons,
Yeah.
The other ones, which have been retrospectively called Alicons, like alligator cons, essentially, the ones that turn into like the alligator thing.
Oh yeah, there were some like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there's now a
Yes.
toy of them in the
Oh,
Earthrise
cool.
line. There is actually and a Quintesson. There's actually a Judge Quintesson in the
I
new
showed
Earthrise
you
line.
that, didn't I? I found a picture of that.
That's kind
Yeah.
of fun. I mean, people have been waiting for that version of the Quintessons for ages, absolutely ages, and now they've got them, which is kind of fun. And the Quintessons they've become a core part of the mythology in iterations since. They've actually gone on with the Transformers and become a core part of that mythology, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because they could have just so easily just dropped that.
Oh yeah. Easy.
Just add it into the film. There's no reason for him to go back to that planet ever again. So just forget about it.
Because we experienced it as children, we just accept the stuff that is just not explained in this film. But the film is full of it. Like the first scene you see is Unicron. Right?
Yeah.
Or Orson, as I call him, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
He's played by Orson Welles, by the way.
I wanted to discuss that, actually. We'll get to... I'll just put a note in that, yeah.
It's the last role of Orson Welles as well. It's the last thing
actually, I'll mention it now. Have you heard there's conflicting reports on his opinion of that film?
Well, from what I hear, the one I've heard is that he just said, "Oh well, they sat me in a booth and they gave me whiskey, so I just did it."
Well, I've heard him say on an interview that he thought he said, "Oh, I just played a giant planet that eats other planets. It's quite ridiculous." But people have taken that to mean that he was saying something bad about the film. But I don't think that's a negative comment. Ridiculous doesn't have to mean
it doesn't have to mean bad. No, it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous in the most big hair metal stad rock 1980s way imaginable. It is ridiculous. Of course it is.
I have also read that people close to him at the time heard him talking about it positively, saying the reason he agreed to it was because it was so weird and so imaginative and so unlike anything he'd ever been asked to do before. Because he was quite well known for hating modern cinema.
Yes.
He thought it was stagnant. He thought it was boring. He thought everything was just a repeat of something come before. And then he's offered this, and he's like, "Yes, I'll do that." And they showed him the animation, and he liked it, and he said it was unusual. And all of this you got to temper by the fact that he knew it was for children.
Yeah. Of course.
So, now the other thing is he died not long after this film.
Yeah, it was very shortly after.
So he hasn't had time to talk about it, because what you find is that even if he didn't like it, people soften over the years towards things.
Yeah.
Like a very good example of that in the media recently, as we're speaking about this, is Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
He, immediately after filming that, spoke very negatively about it. Not the franchise itself, but he had a very bad time filming it, and he swore never to return to that role ever again.
I think he had a bad experience with some elements of the fan base as well. He found that very difficult to deal with.
Yes, but as we record this now, 15 years later, he has been going to conventions and meeting fans, and he's spoken very positively about that. He's admitted that he was wrong about a lot of that. He said he wishes he'd done it sooner, and he has just this last week he has signed up to play the Doctor again in some radio plays.
Oh, that's so cool! So
with the Big Finish ones. He's coming back to that role, I wonder if he'll come back in the 60th anniversary.
Oh, that would be nice. I would like to see that.
Traditionally, on the anniversaries, they have a multi-Doctor story.
Yep.
Wouldn't it be good if they had one with all 5 of the modern ones in it?
Oh God, I'd love it. I'd love it to bits, especially if Peter Capaldi, because he was my favourite of the modern Doctors.
Eccleston, Tennant, Smith, Capaldi, and Jodie, all 5 of them.
That would be fab.
And I think that's much more likely now, given that he's actually doing the role again, and he speaks so well of it.
It is a shame that he hadn't gone through the process for the Day of the Doctor, because it's very clear. I mean, I've just this second, because I'm going through the modern Doctor Who again at the moment, and I've just before we came on, actually, I just finished watching the Day of the Doctor.
But the War Doctor was supposed to be him.
Yeah, you can tell.
You can tell because in that season with him in it, he's so clearly got post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
He's violent, he's aggressive, all that compassion and stuff that the Doctor's supposed to have has kind of gone.
Yeah.
He's like, there's scenes like with that Cassandra where he just lets her die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Dalek episode.
The Dalek one. When Mickey's getting in trouble on the first episode and Rose is like, we've got to save him, and he's like, nah, I can't be asked doing that for one person. Yeah, he's clearly, that's the whole point. If you just watch this and the last thing you saw was Sylvester McCoy or Paul McGann, you're supposed to think, what the fuck has happened to him?
Yeah,
and that's the point. That's exactly the point. And the War Doctor was supposed to be him, but as you said, he wouldn't agree to it, so then they kind of added another one in, which was also brilliant.
I mean, John Hurt,
amazing. But that, like you said, that was clearly meant to be Christopher Eccleston in that role.
You can feel sort of the gaps where Christopher Eccleston was meant to be.
Yes.
You know? And it's kind of a shame because it's lovely to have. Tennant. It's great to see Tennant as the Doctor again. That's lovely, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just so much fun to have the different Doctors interacting. That is part of the fun of these anniversary episodes, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
But my God,
I genuinely think he will come back for that 60th. Yeah. It's only in a couple of years, you know.
Yeah, I know, right? God Almighty. But that would be fun. That would be fun, especially since there's like so much happened since then, you know.
Yeah.
So much evolution happened.
Yeah, they've changed a lot, and there'd be a lot that you could sort of have. It'd be interesting to get his opinion on, if you like.
They need to bring Donna back.
Oh yeah, she'd do well with it. She'd be quite funny with Eccleston.
The Doctor Donna, bring her back as the Doctor Donna. You know, that'd be great. Anywho, yeah, sorry.
How that relates to Orson Welles? What I'm going to say is that Orson Welles did not have the benefit of that 10 years later where he could look back and say, you know what, that was really fun, I'm glad I did that. Look how many people still love it, how many people still talk about it. He didn't have the benefit of that. Because he died too soon after it.
I mean, interestingly, there are other actors who have sort of like recurred in the franchise. So in this instance, you get the remade Megatron, Galvatron, who I've always preferred. I love Galvatron. I think Galvatron's
he's brilliant. Yeah, Leonard
Nimoy, played by Leonard Nimoy.
He's loving it though. You can tell he is. The venom he puts into everything he says and the aggression. It's like the complete opposite of Spock, isn't it? Where he's got to be placid the entire time.
He's just having fun playing a bastard, isn't it? He's just having fun playing like the arch bastard of this show, which he is. It's Megatron, you know. I mean, this version of Galvatron, interestingly, only occurs in the film. Because in the cartoon series, because Galvatron is so much of a threat in the film, which he is, you know, they have to neuter him in the cartoon.
Right.
And the way they do it is by making him mad. When he's thrown out of Unicron.
Does that make him insane?
He lands on a planet called Thrall, and he lands in this like bubbling pit of plasma. And the Decepticons, after the events of the movie, in the third season, at the beginning of the third season, the Decepticons are done. They're down and out. They've got no leader. They've got no one, and they're basically de-energized. They're dying. And Cyclonus and Scourge go looking for Galvatron to kind of like cohere them, to bring them back together. And they find him on Thrall. Unfortunately, the plasma the events within Unicron sort of flying through space have damaged his mental circuitry, and he's batshit.
Right.
Throughout the third season, he is absolutely batshit insane, and he beyond. I mean, Megatron, for all of his faults in the first two seasons, isn't mad.
No.
You know, he's coherent. He knows what he's doing. He fails a lot, as 1980s Saturday morning cartoon villains do. They tend to fail, you know. But
he doesn't in the film, though. That's again, it's the PG rating, isn't it?
But he's not crazy, you know.
No.
But Galvatron in the third season of Transformers. In fact, you know, have you ever seen the episode Web World?
No, I've not seen much of this cartoon after the film, to be honest.
The episode Web World is absolutely hilarious. It is legitimately a comedy episode. And I shit you not, the Decepticons are so sick of Galvatron's insanity that Cyclonus takes him to a psychiatrist. A planet which is just... the whole planet is designed as a giant, mental hospital.
Right.
And he takes Galvatron there to get better. And it's hilarious. It's as funny as you think it would be. And in the end, Galvatron's insanity ends up infecting the entire planet and turning it on itself.
Wow. Okay.
So that's how mad Galvatron is. But that's
That's a good idea though, because otherwise he'd be far too. Like you say, compared to in a cartoon the Saturday morning cartoon version,
Yeah.
he's far too legitimate a threat.
Yeah, in the movie, I mean,
Yeah.
when Megatron is powered up by Unicron and becomes Galvatron, he's much more powerful, and you can see that in the film. In the film, the remade Decepticons, the new ones, Cyclonus, Scourge, and the Sweeps.
Scourge has got a beard, which I thought was weird.
That's a thing that happens to Transformers after the movie. You start to get lots of Transformers that have bafflingly got beards. I don't know.
I always thought it was odd.
I like it myself. It's weird, but I
It
kind of
looks
like
cool,
it.
but it's yeah.
It is strange, yeah. But
Like Unicron does.
Unicron does as well, yeah. I mean, one of the things I like about Scourge is if you look at him, he kind of resembles Unicron.
Yeah, he does.
Which
Yeah,
is kind of fun. The comics, interestingly, they really went with this notion, like the UK comics really went with this notion that Galvatron, Cyclonus, and Scourge, because they're creations of Unicron, are infinitely more powerful than a normal Transformer.
yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
Galvatron in the comics is like unstoppable.
Yeah,
He's absolutely unstoppable, and there's a series called the Time Wars, right, where Galvatron, for reasons, basically it's just for reasons, ends up jumping back in time to like 1986 or whatever. So you get Megatron and Galvatron teaming up at one point, and there's a point at like the apex of this series where they're fighting both the Decepticons and the Autobots, and they are ripping them to bits.
Yeah.
Loads of them die in that because they could get away with it in the comics. You know, they could
yes,
get away with
of course,
it.
yeah.
But Galvatron like rips hundreds of Decepticons and Autobots limb from limb. You get a sincere massacre occurring at that point. Galvatron has always been in the comics very hard to put down.
Well, that makes sense, because why would Unicron just fix him up and not, it was using him for a purpose, so it makes sense that he'd power him up there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, apparently in the original version of the script, there was supposed to be, like, you know, the scene at the end where Galvatron is inside Unicron and he's got the Matrix around his neck and Hot Rod finds him, and Galvatron says something along the lines of, believe it or not, we are allies now against the common foe. Yeah. That was supposed to be taken much further. In the climax of the original script, they would team up to defeat Unicron, and then Galvatron would turn on the Autobots and he would be like the end threat, you know?
Right.
But that didn't pan out. It changed.
I'm glad they didn't, because that would have diminished Unicron. I think if you learn anything from the final season of Game of Thrones, you cannot build something up as a massive threat and then, okay, that's done now, what's next?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
You spend 8 years building the Night King and his army up, and then you deal with it in one episode.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then, you know, it's like, no, it would have been that all over again.
I mean, like, the threat of Unicron is insane, isn't it? I mean, he's
basically Galactus, isn't he?
It's Galactus, yeah. It's the Transformers equivalent of Galactus. I mean, I love, one of my favourite sequences in the entire film is that opening sequence.
Yeah, it's brilliant animation and the music, and it's just so grim, isn't it? And horrible.
So grim. What the hell? Like, you know, the original Transformers cartoon, it's not that serious, is it? You know, it's I know it's.
But it's like a society. There's children and people. They're just going about the business. They look like they're in a shopping mall or something.
Yeah, it's called Lithone, the planet, and yeah, it shows you that again. There's another planet populated by robots primarily.
Yeah.
And it kills them all. It kills them all. It eats them all. This is what Unicron does. It goes around eating planets for reasons, you know. But
the way he does it isn't even pleasant.
No.
It's not like a quick boom, you're gone. It digs these massive claws into the side of the planet and then just rips it apart from the inside out. So you're alive long enough to know what's happening.
Right. It is madness, isn't it? It's just like, I mean, like, I for kids of the era who are used to seeing, like, you know, the the stuff in the original cartoon, which is usually a little bit funny, a little bit, Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah.
It was usually Megatron, I'm going to create a super weapon to destroy the Autobots or something like that. Something silly like that, and then he'd smack Starscream about or whatever. This, where you see an honest to God apocalypse at the beginning, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. And the fact that they chose to go with that. They chose to go with that for the opening of the film. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, but it sets the tone. It immediately sets the tone, because you think, okay, they're not playing games here. This is absolutely serious. This is something new, and it's something that's a legitimate threat.
Yeah,
and,
this is beyond the Decepticons, isn't it?
Yeah,
this is
beyond everything.
It's beyond the Decepticons. I mean,
that scene with where Unicron does transform Megatron. I love that sequence. It's so good. The voice acting from both of them is brilliant. There's that line, which is the best Orson Welles line, where Megatron says, "Nobody summons Megatron," and he says, "Well, it pleases me to be the first." Yeah. And it's the way he says it is just, it's so well delivered, that line from Orson Welles.
I mean, and I love the balls of Megatron as well. Like, he's face to face with a bloody planet that's talking to him. And Megatron's dead, basically. He's like, he's been
fucked at that point, isn't
it? He's still defying Unicron. Yeah. It's like, the arrogance of Megatron is madness, isn't it, at that point? Yeah. Although, he's still not crazy. He does realize, actually, no, I better go along with this.
Yeah.
And ends up becoming Galvatron, obviously.
But there's so many sequences in that where that film where the dialogue is done so well that by any margin you would hold it up as well delivered. Like when you're watching a scene, and I actually think we were talking about Doctor Who earlier, a lot of modern Doctor Who does this, particularly with Peter Capaldi. Where there's a scene where someone delivers something so well that you just want to wind it back and watch it again.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I mean,
there's scenes like that in this film, and this is an animated film. Yeah. Decades before, that was a credible thing for actors to do. It's not like now, where Pixar films are full of Oscar-winning. It wasn't like that in the 80s.
No, it really wasn't. No, and funnily enough, a lot of the voice actors that have become almost like Oscar-worthy are as a result of the roles they did play in 1980s cartoons. People like Pete Cullen and Frank Welker and whatnot. But true.
I mean, there's that scene with you mentioned that scene earlier, but where Galvatron is inside Unicron and he's got the Matrix and he's fighting Hot Rod.
Yep.
And where he says to him, he's listing the Transformers that he's killed. Yeah. And then he says, "It's a pity you Autobots die so easily." The way he says that is so good.
Leonard Nimoy
is Leonard Nimoy, who's like the gentlest, softest soul who ever lived. And just the satisfaction in his voice as he's strangling him, and he's like, "Oh, it's a pity you all die so easily."
Loving it, and
he's brilliant. It gives you chills, that scene. And then it's immediately followed by him opening the Matrix, which is... all of it is just brilliant. But it's the quality of the voice acting just absolutely makes that.
Well, I mean, the cast they got, I mean, they went for the whole sort of like star-studded cast thing for this movie. So, like, you get a lot of actors who were really big in the 80s but aren't anymore. So you get like Robert Stack playing Ultra Magnus, who was huge. He played Elliot Ness, in The Untouchables. Yeah. Huge actor. Judd Nelson. Judd Nelson, like the iconic 80s actor, who plays Hot Rod, Leonard Nimoy.
That guy who did the Micro Machines advert was Blur, wasn't he? He was really famous in America.
Yes, he was. I can't remember his name, but he's the guy...
I can't, but he was huge in America for stuff like that.
He holds the record, doesn't he, as like the fastest articulate speaker in the world.
Yeah, because you can understand every word he's saying, but it's just insane how quickly he speaks.
Fast, it's insanely fast. They just went for it, and it works out really well because
it really does. It gives it a level of credibility that it wouldn't have if those lines were being delivered by lesser voice actors, it would lose something.
And alongside them, you've got the classic cast. So you've got Chris Larter as Starscream, the late great Chris Larter, who died of throat cancer, interestingly, who was in so many 1980s cartoons, so many of them, doing his iconic sort of screechy Starscream voice. You've got Frank Welker playing Megatron, who is really, I mean, lots of people have played Megatron since Frank Welker, and a lot of them have done a really good job. Did you ever see Transformers Animated?
Don't think I've seen that one. No.
That was a line that Nickelodeon did, and in that show, Megatron is played by what's his name? I think Corey Burton. I think he plays Megatron in that particular series. Who is the guy who played Shockwave in Generation 1?
Okay.
Interestingly, and he plays Megatron very differently from Frank Welker. He plays it. You know how Frank Welker does the classic gravelly voice.
Yeah.
Corey Burton does this very snide, very sort of English voice for Megatron, and it works really, really, really well. But since then, Frank Welker has returned to the role, so you've got Transformers Prime, where Megatron is Frank Welker and Peter Cullen is Optimus again.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
Did you hear the story about how he came up with Optimus Prime's voice?
It's his brother, isn't it? It's Peter Cullen's brother, who was a veteran, wasn't he?
He was a Vietnam veteran, but he always saw him as like really strong and brave, but he was always compassionate. Yes. He wasn't this like hoorah American sort of soldier, because he said that true strength comes from being compassionate and not always grabbing your gun if you don't need to and all that. And he wanted to put that into the character, and he did. So he imitated his voice.
Yeah, that works really well, actually, because
he does.
Optimus, in all of his, the Peter Cullen roles, Optimus is always very withdrawn. He's kind of like
you always get that impression that if he don't have to fight, he won't.
Yeah, it's a subdued Optimus, isn't it? He steps back. He very rarely shouts, very rarely loses his cool. He's sort of like the sage Optimus Prime.
Yes.
Which I like, I like that rather a lot. And I think that is part of why the character kind of caught on.
Yeah.
If he were the more sort of like classic, the way 1980s boys action heroes were, where they tended to be a bit bombastic, they tended to be a bit more all-American hero, I don't think it would have worked so well.
No, I agree. Not for Optimus Prime. You can have characters like Hot Rod's a little bit like that. You can have that, but not for Optimus Prime. He wouldn't work like that.
I mean, I really liked the way some of the portrayals of the character have gone more recently. So again, going to animated, it's David Kaye who plays Optimus in that, who played, bizarrely, this is a weird lineage, he played the Beast Wars version of Megatron. Very odd.
Okay,
very
that's
odd.
A bit of a strange turnaround, isn't it?
But David Kaye, because animated Optimus is really different from all the other Optimuses. He is not a Prime. He is he's not like the leader of the Autobots. Actually, he's a disgraced member of the Cybertronian elite guard. There's some scandal in his past that has made him sort of a down and out. So he's now the captain of this kind of little space bridge repair crew who are nobody. They really are nobody. And he kind of has to earn his chops throughout. So he plays him in this very sort of pragmatic way. He's a working guy. That's how he plays him. He's a space bridge repairman.
Yeah.
That's how he plays him. It's really
blue collar sort of Optimus.
Yeah, it really is. There's actually one of my favourite lines in that show, one of my absolute favourite lines. There's a scene I think it's in season 3, where Megatron has been gone for a long time and he turns back up. And Optimus goes, Megatron. And Megatron says to him, "So, you do remember my name. Pity I can't remember yours." And it's like, nice. I love that. Love that. Love it to bits. But it's interesting to see how the characters have evolved and changed and been portrayed differently down the line,
Yeah, of course.
I
Yeah,
really love
yeah.
to see that. I mean, Megatron has evolved massively as a character. There was a time when he was the character from this cartoon, which is he's the villain, you know, he's the big bad guy. He's just power mad. He wants the war just to basically take over Cybertron, take over the world. He's just a tyrant, yeah.
Yeah.
But he's actually evolved massively. I mean, largely through the comics, but also through the cartoon series as well. There was like if you look at Transformers Prime, where again it's the Welker and Cullen Optimus. He used to be the Lord Protector of Cybertron. He used to be a really decent guy once
Mm.
upon a time, and him and Optimus used to work together. In the comics, if you read, there's a comic from IDW called Megatron Origins that looks at where the Decepticons came from, where the movement came from, and that introduces this incredible political element to it. Megatron's a miner. He's from the lower classes of Cybertron. And
Yeah.
Cybertron used to be this oligarchy where there were these upper classes, this sort of like political class, who were very slowly leeching resources away from the public. And one of those resources that they were automating was the Energon mines. And as the robots who were the miners were being made redundant, they were being decommissioned. They were just being destroyed, you know.
Right. Okay.
And the Decepticons and Megatron arose from that. So
Yeah. So there was a
suddenly,
legitimate grievance to start
right,
with.
suddenly there's a lot more going on here, yeah? Suddenly, Megatron and the Decepticons are not just the power mad lunatics that they appear to be, yeah?
Yeah.
I kind of love that. I kind of love that. The fact that the Decepticons over time, obviously, I mean, in a kids' franchise from the 1980s, it didn't matter that much. You just needed the
No.
narrative for the toy line, yeah? But since then, because the people like us who were kids at the time have grown up and now demand something a bit more sophisticated from their storytelling, the franchise has grown up as well.
Yes,
And
of course. Yeah.
suddenly Megatron's a character. I mean, have you read the later IDW comics, the More Than Meets the Eye and Lost Light?
I have read some IDW ones, but I can't remember which because it was a few years ago now. But I have some of the graphic novel ones
Right.
from those.
Well, in these ones, these are set after the war. The war is finished. It's ended. After millions of years, it's ended. It's over, yeah? And Megatron is on this ship, populated largely by Autobots. A couple of old Decepticons as well, but largely by Autobots. And he's on his way to face judgment. But he's part of the crew.
Right.
He's not a prisoner. He's done it voluntarily. He's part of the crew. And it's about how he experiences things on this journey that change him profoundly. You know, how he starts to
Yeah.
look back at who he was and what he's authored. There's a great sequence where they go to a planet, and this planet is a record. The population of this planet keep records of every death of every entity in the entire universe, right?
Right.
And those who are responsible for the deaths of other entities are portrayed as monuments, as kind of like statues, and the deaths that are attributed to them become flowers around them. Megatron
Okay.
finds his own statue, and for miles and miles and miles around, all it is flowers.
Yeah.
And there's just this quiet moment where he's looking around at these plains, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, right, that's really interesting. He even has like he encounters other Decepticons because the Decepticons after the war are kind of scattered. They're all over the place. Some of them don't even know it's ended and are still trying to fight it. Some of them
Yeah.
are
That
just,
makes sense.
you know, some of them are just lost. They haven't had any radio contact with Cybertron. They don't know that it's ended. So he meets Decepticons along the way, and he kind of talks to them, you know. He tries to tell them, well, it's over, and this is why. Okay,
Yeah.
this is why it's over, and it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of brilliant. It's quiet. It's conversational. It's psychological. At the very end of the series, at the very end, he becomes an Autobot.
Okay.
He actually
That's
takes off
different. Yeah.
the Decepticon symbol and puts on the Autobot symbol, and it's really cool. It's a really interesting, clever journey that he goes on, you know?
Yeah.
I kind of love that. I do kind of love that. I mean, you've had glimmers of it in other series, like the Megatron from Beast Wars and Beast Machines is not the original Megatron.
No, it's a descendant or something,
That's
isn't
right.
it?
He's a guy. He's basically a member of the Predacons, who are the descendants of the Decepticons. And he's a revolutionary. He doesn't like the fact that in the present day, the Predacons are basically third or fourth tier citizens. So he wants to kickstart the war again, and he takes the name Megatron from his idol, from the original Megatron. But there's a point in Beast Machines where he becomes this very different character. He's got ideology. He's got a perspective which is beyond, I just want to conquer everything. Basically, he wants. There's a great moment where he's talking to Optimus Primal, who's the descendant of Optimus Prime, and he says, "We both want the same thing." And Optimus Primal says, "Yeah, well, what's that?" And he says, "Harmony."
Yeah.
Which is what he wants. That is actually what he wants. It's just that his own perspective is very different in how to achieve it.
Do you know what I watched recently, which was very similar to that?
What's
that? I was watching some clips on YouTube from Doctor Who, actually, what we're talking about. There's a scene with Peter Capaldi's Doctor where he's talking to, I think it's the Zygons, those sea creatures.
Yeah.
And they have infiltrated, because they can change shape, they have infiltrated the planet, and they basically want to destroy the human race. There's like an insurgency within them who want to destroy the human race and take the planet for themselves.
Yeah.
And UNIT, who's like the military unit who fights against aliens and stuff, are fighting back against them. And the Doctor has got them, the leader of the Zygons and the leader of UNIT, in a room, and he's given them both a switch that, if you activate it, it will either kill one side or the other, basically.
Right.
And he delivers this speech about war.
I remember the speech.
It's so good. It's so good, because he basically says, when you've got everything the way you want it, when you've killed all the people on the other side, what happens after that? What are you going to do next? What's this world going to look like that you've envisioned?
Yeah.
And he gives this wonderful example. He says, will there be music? Will people be allowed to make music? Who will make the music? Who will and then he says, what are you going to do with people like you? People who come along and decide to change it. And then and she says, oh, well, we'll just beat them. And he goes, nobody ever beats them for long. That wheel just keeps turning all the time. The only way you ever get peace is by someone just saying enough.
Yeah.
Forget what's happened before. As long as you go with they killed some of us, so we killed some of them, so they killed some of us. It's never gonna stop.
Right.
You just need to draw a line under it and say, that's it. Because every side always thinks the only way you're going to get peace is by beating the other side. But as long as you both think that, it's never going to stop.
That's it, and that is exactly where the IDW Megatron goes ultimately.
Yeah,
and it takes
that.
Don't get me wrong. It takes millions of years, because one thing, the IDW timeline, the original one, there's a new one now, but the old one that's finished, the one thing it establishes is that this war that the Autobots and Decepticons have been fighting, it has gone on for millions of years.
Yes, because they're not organic entities, so time is a different thing to them, isn't it?
Totally different. So, like, they've seen the rise and fall and the evolution and the devolution of worlds, and, the Decepticons aren't just, like, on Earth and Cybertron like they are in the original cartoon. They're all over the universe. They've got this whole, like, protocol for terraforming planets and for destroying the local populations, and there's all sorts going on out there. There's like you get, for the first time for me anyway, in the IDW universe, you get the sense that this war is a war. It's an intergalactic war where there's death, there's mutilation, there's like genocide that happens. It's really good. It's really good. I mean, obviously you can't really portray all of that in the 1980s cartoon.
No. Not to that scale, and also not to that level of sort of hostility and aggression and stuff. There's also only so much you can do. Did you read the IDW crossover Infestation?
I Did I? I can't remember. I can't
It's
remember.
where this dimension opens up with like Lovecraftian entities in it,
Oh
and it
no, I didn't.
Transformers is in that.
Is it
And you
right?
get some
Right.
Decepticons who discover a vast power source buried beneath the ocean.
Oh dear.
So they travel down to get it, and they become possessed by whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you get Decepticons with like tentacles growing out of them and stuff, and they're all speaking with like one voice that's not theirs.
Oh
It looks
dear.
like programming code, but it's all symbols and stuff. And it's but basically this threat affects all universes at once. So you
Right.
see the Ghostbusters dealing with it,
Oh,
and you see
brilliant.
GI Joe and various other stuff. But the I specifically remember that Transformers section where you get the like because you get the Decepticons with the like tentacles and stuff, and it's
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah,
I like the
it's pretty
idea.
cool.
I like the idea of Lovecraftian Transformers. I've got to say that does it for
I've
me.
got the book. When you post me my Hulk ones back, I'll
Yes,
send it you
yes,
if you want.
I'll be sending those. I mean, my period of isolation has ended now, so I will be posting those
I'll
ASAP.
post it you if you want when I get them. I'll
Thank you
swap
so
over.
much. Thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, obviously, I mean, one of the things that anyone who goes back and watches Transformers the movie after listening to this, they've got to kind of take into account is that it is kind of like a time capsule, isn't it? It's an artifact of its era. In fact, I would say it's like pure crystallized 1980s. If you're a
It is,
kid,
even because it's. I tell you what I don't like about it though, which is a very 80s
hmm,
thing, the insistence on having a human characters in
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And one of them's a
yeah,
kid.
yeah.
Why is there always that character?
Mhm.
Like in He-Man, you've got Orko, and in
Mhm.
Thundercats, you've got Snarf. There's
Snarf, yeah.
always this little
The
jokey,
sidekick.
whiny little
Yep.
prick who everyone hates, including
Mhm.
the viewers. No one ever buys that action figure.
Right.
Nobody wants that character. Why are they in it?
Yeah, it's Daniel, isn't it? Daniel. I mean,
Daniel, that's
Spike I
it.
can
Yeah.
take. Spike I can take. He was actually kind of fun in the original cartoon series. He wasn't as annoying as a lot of these sidekick characters could be. I mean, Snarf is probably the apex. Snarf, he brings out that part of me that wants to kick, basically, just punt
Yeah.
him flying,
Yeah.
The comic relief character, yeah. But Daniel becomes part, sadly, after the movie, Daniel becomes part of the main
I
thrust
bet.
of the
Yeah,
whole
I'm not
thing.
surprised by that.
He is in most of the episodes of season 3, the vast majority of them. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you seen the very end of the Western Transformers cartoon?
No, no, I haven't.
It's a
No.
three-part miniseries because by that point, obviously the franchise was really failing. It was kind of done. It's a three-part miniseries called The Rebirth, which featured things like the Headmasters, the Target Masters, all those kinds of
Of
things.
course,
So
yeah.
Scorpion Arc, Fortress Maximus, all those are in it. But Daniel ends up becoming a headmaster in it.
Okay.
So he actually becomes a
I think
transformer.
I've seen that actually. I think
Yeah,
I have seen the headmaster. I know I've seen some of the headmaster's stuff.
yeah.
I think I have seen that one.
He basically becomes the headmaster of RC, the token female
Yes, he
Autobot.
does. I've seen that. Yes, I have seen that.
Although I will give
Why
him
on earth has
this.
she got a woman's body though? You can have
Oh,
a female one, but why does she need to look like a woman
right.
with like feminine curves and
It's
shit? None of the others look like
no.
human men.
I
They
know,
ain't got
right?
abs and pecs and stuff. So why has
It's
she got boobs and hips and thighs? What?
right.
It's so
It's
stupid.
such a 1980s thing, isn't it? It's such a
Yeah.
1980s thing. Since then, it has evolved, fortunately. So now there are Transformers of all sexes and genders, of all types, who have all got different body forms.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
will give. I mean, I will give to the power of N Beast Machines. I will praise that show to the nth degree for having a female Transformer character who is not the archetype you described, Striker.
Yeah.
She is brilliant. She's butch. She's massive. She's like
Well, there's one on Bumblebee. We're talking about that. One of the
yeah,
Decepticons is a female, but she's utterly devastating. She
right,
doesn't look like you wouldn't look at her and go, "That's a girl one."
right,
There's,
right. I
that
mean,
was a good decision.
it has evolved since then. So now you can get like female Transformers of all body types, and you get male Transformers of all body types as well. Beast Wars and Beast Machines again was partly responsible for that. And it's evolved in lots of other ways as well. I mean, in the IDW comics, you even get stuff like there are things like Transformers relationships, so there are like Transformers that are compatible with one another on like a
Okay.
programming level. And what it establishes, and I love this to bits, Cybertron, basically, all the Transformers that were left on Cybertron are nominally, although they're not male as such, they're kind of male coded. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Cybertron, and this is something the comics kind of emphasize, it's a primarily homo-romantic culture.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Doesn't
Yeah,
it make
if you're
sense?
going to have romance with yeah,
Right?
but that shit won't even matter with machines
Of
because it's
course.
only going to be on whether or not you're compatible machines.
Right. So
So
you've
you're not
got
going to have a
like
sexual preference or
no.
anything.
So there are pairings. There are pairings in IDW. Chrome Dome and Rewind are in a relationship. Cyclonus and Tailgate are in a relationship. It's kind of fun, you know?
Yeah,
It's kind of fun. You've got Transformers who have odd crushes on one another, whether it's reciprocated or not, you know? That's kind of fun. And I like the fact they established that. And they also established that because there are different colonies of Transformers out there, because the war's been going on for so long, there are different colonies of Transformers, obviously. So there are Transformers that have settled on other planets where they've evolved in different ways.
of course.
So
Yeah,
there are actually colonies of female-coded Transformers,
yeah,
which makes a lot of sense. They introduced the Beast Transformers, you know, the techno-organic ones from Beast Wars and Beast
yeah.
Machines, using this very concept. So it works really well. You know, it's very clever. It's very clever. Tarantulas is one of the favorite characters from Beast Wars. He is essentially a spider transformer.
Yeah, of course.
Who's a maniac. He's like a sadistic maniac in the original Beast Wars. He is in the IDW universe a neutral transformer, but who was aiding Prowl, the Autobot Prowl, with intelligence and with weapons and whatnot. And he has this odd, slightly creepy romantic obsession with Prowl. It's really odd, but it
I
works
like when
so
they do
well.
a different. Well, wasn't there a character in the series who was either who could like switch between Decepticon and
Yes,
Autobot? I
double
vaguely
dealer.
remember that.
There's two. There's a double dealer who can do that, and there's also counterpunch and punch. Yeah. There's also, I mean, there was an explicitly gay character in the cartoon Prime, Knockout. Knockout, the Decepticon Knockout, is pretty gay, and Starscream in that series as well is pretty gay.
Starscream was always a bit like a poisonous queen, though,
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh
it?
God,
Even
yeah.
when
I
they
mean,
couldn't be explicit, he
oh
blatantly
my
is.
God. I mean,
He gives himself a coronation and a crown and everything.
I know, right? Looking back on the G1 cartoon as an adult and the interaction between Megatron and Starscream, they are so in a relationship. Or used to be.
Yeah, used to be. I would say used to be.
There is definitely like tension there.
Yeah,
You know?
Skeletor. Megatron's like the butch one,
Yeah.
and he's like his effeminate lover who he's
Yeah.
moved on now and he's not happy about it.
Absolutely, yeah. There's so,
Yeah.
yeah. Starscream is kind of that stereotype of the slightly neurotic guy, you know.
He is. He really is. When you see it, you can see that. Yeah.
Oh, totally. But in Prime, they just go with it. They just run with it, and he so is. There's a great interaction between him and Knockout where they're almost flirting, and it's like, okay, all right, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like the fact that this stuff is being acknowledged in the cartoon. You know, that's fun. That's a lot of fun, and I like the fact that they have the leeway to go there. I mean, that's evidence of something we've talked about before, which is the evolution of children's media, you know?
Very much, yeah.
I mean, obviously, you've had recently the Netflix She-Ra, which, of course, ends with... oh, I don't want to spoil it for you. Have you...
No, I'm aware of it. It's
okay,
fine.
yeah. By the way, ladies and gents, if you haven't seen it, spoilers happening right now. It ends with the relationship between Adora and Catra. You know, that's what it's all about, ultimately. And that's really cool. That's really fun. The fact that stuff that was... I mean, you go back and watch the 1980s She-Ra, and it's so queer. It's such a fucking queer-coded show, like the original E-Man, you know. But it can't be explicit about it.
No.
It can't be explicit about it, which is a real shame, you know. So, well, what the Netflix one does is it brings it out.
Yeah.
It takes that subtext and it brings it to the fore, and it makes it part of the story. It makes it part of the character interactions, which is really wonderful. And I like the fact Transformers is going that way too. It's evolved, so it's not so much about the action, it's not so much about the war, it's about how that affects the characters.
It never should be, though. I think, you know, like we were talking about action films earlier, even in proper, what you would call popcorn action films, you've got to give a shit about the characters.
Yeah.
You've got to give a shit about what's going on and why it's going on. It can't just be... Like, for instance, a great example of this is in the most recent Avengers movie, The Endgame. You get that amazing battle sequence at the end where all the Avengers are there and they're fighting Thanos' army. The only reason that is as amazing as it is, not just because visually it's great, but it's because you've spent 10 years getting to know these characters.
Yeah.
You know their relationships with each other. You know what they've all been through. You know what they've lost. You know what they've gained. You know all of that. You care about all of that. So it matters so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
if you didn't have any of that, it doesn't work.
It becomes hollow, doesn't it? It becomes empty. I mean, you actually... did you watch the latest Transformers show on Netflix, Siege?
No, it's on my watch list, but I've not watched it yet.
I mean, I don't want to prejudice your perspectives on it, but it's very flat.
Right.
Like, tonally, it's very flat. It's all kind of one note. It's all very sort of intense action, and it's kind of like, I'm not invested in this. You know?
That's my point, you see. Without it, it's just someone bashing the toys together, isn't it?
That's kind of it. And for me, there are glimmers of a good show. There are little references they throw into all the stuff that's happened in like the comics and whatnot, which make it could have been good, but they don't do anything with it. So ultimately, it's kind of a throwback. It just becomes good guys versus bad guys again.
Yeah, that seems like a regression, doesn't it?
It does, unfortunately. Yeah. And the fact is also, I mean, one of the things, again, we were talking earlier about how brilliant the voice acting in this cartoon is, and it's great fun. It's like, it's big, it's often very silly in the original, like, movie. It's often like, you know, the characters are very silly in their characterization, like Blur, who just, you know, his gimmick is he talks really fast.
It is, but it works.
It works. It works really
so
well.
Earnestly.
Yeah, it works so well. It does. You know exactly who's talking. All the characters, like Retgar, played by Eric Idle, who talks in like a TV vox pop.
The junk bots. I forgot about them. Yeah, they're a weird little culture, aren't they?
Completely bizarre. So 80s, love it to bits. It's so
brilliant.
Strange.
Just this planet they land on, again, expanding that universe. They land on a planet, and it's Transformers that live on a planet that's basically like the universe's trash heap.
Yep.
But they have a whole city, they have a whole culture, they have a spaceship made out of junk.
Yeah, and their culture.
And they've learned to speak through discarded televisions and radios. So the main character, which is an idea they kind of copy for Bumblebee in the new film, isn't it?
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. Basically, Retgar and the Junkions, they talk, as they say themselves, they talk TV.
He's got a beard and all.
I mean, this is actually something that really ages the 19... Because, of course, he talks TV popisms, but they're from the 1980s and before.
Yes.
So they're like... A lot of people will not get the cultural touchstones that Retgar is, like, spouting.
No, probably not, but... that might just kind of add to the alienness of it. I mean,
it's fun. It works. I mean, a lot of the things he comes out with are really archaic anyway. They're like from like the very early days of television. So, you know, it's fine. And it's such a weird character. It kind of works. Again, Eric Idle, another odd, weird bit of voice acting. Whoever would have thought a Python would be doing a Transformer?
Who does he do? Is he the junk bot?
Yeah, he's Retgar, right, yeah. I mean, like, what?
No, but it works because he does so many different voices.
It is cool, isn't it?
Retgar's a mix of different voices, isn't he? Because he's depending on what channel he's tuned into at that point.
Yeah.
So
it's brilliant.
Yeah, but that's brilliant. That whole sequence of,
Uh-huh.
again, it's expanding that universe. It's not just Decepticons and Autobots, it's
Uh-huh.
other Transformers that aren't even part of that.
Right. Do you know they brought Retgar back in animated?
Did they?
Yeah,
Okay.
and here weirdness again. This weird kind of strange relationship with the voice actors that occurs in these cartoons. The song that plays on Junk on the planet of
Yeah,
Junk,
it's
the
Weird Al
Weird Al
Yankovic.
Yankovic, yeah, Dare to Be Stupid. They got Weird Al Yankovic to play Retgar in animated.
Right, okay.
So
That's
it's
so weird, isn't it?
you know what's even weirder? They modelled both the animation model and the toy on Weird Al. It looks like him.
Okay.
It actually looks like him. And the toy of Retgar and the animation model, because he is in animated, he is literally made out of junk. He's
Yeah.
all little bits of junk sort of fused together. His head is an old TV. It's got the antenna and
What I
everything.
loved about that sequence on the 80s film, though, is the fact that the Autobots arrive and they
Hmm.
fight them and there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And then the Decepticons arrive and destroy one of the Autobots
Hmm.
and then sort of leave. And they kind of realise then that, oh, shit, these aren't actually the bad guys, are they?
Right.
And then they help them out then. And
Yeah.
I like that. I like having this kind of third party who
Yeah.
isn't anything to do with that. But then there's also that with the Sharkticons, they're not part
Yeah.
of it either. And then and then Unicron, and it just expands that this war is not the only thing going on in the
Right.
universe. There's so many people who are just not a part of this at
Right,
all.
and I love the fact, for my money, I kind of like the fact it just doesn't bother explaining most of them. Unicron
Now,
exists, don't know where he comes from, don't know
yeah,
why
but
he
you
eats
don't need to,
planets.
because how big is the universe and how
Right,
long has it taken him to get to where we are in the universe? He's been
right.
traveling it's like Galactus again. He's existed. Galactus in Marvel Comics is the first living being
Yeah,
in the current version of the universe because he was the last survivor of the old universe
yes,
and he was brought into this one and absorbed part of the power of the Big Bang, but it's constantly draining away at him, which
yeah,
means he constantly needs to replenish himself with the energies of the Big Bang, which are found most prominently in entire planets.
yeah,
So he eats planets because he has to. He's not malevolent. That's just what he has to do.
yeah. He's
Are
kind of a
you
tragic
malevolent for
character.
what you ate today? You know, it's something. Whatever you ate today, someone had to die for it. Whether it's vegetables
Right,
or meat, something's died so you could take its life force. That's what food is. His food just happens to be planets because of the sheer size of him. That does not make him evil.
right. Yeah, he's kind of a tragic character, isn't he,
Yeah,
Galactus?
and it's just because he's been traveling the universe for so long. By the time he gets to our planet, it's like the 20th century, and it's the
Right.
same with Unicron. Really,
Yeah.
he's been out there all along. It's just he's only just got here.
They do explain Unicron. I mean, he's got lots of origins depending on where you go.
Yeah, I've read
So
one where he's basically like the devil.
yeah, he is.
version.
He's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
most consistent one, the one that kind of like transcends most of the universes. He's like the elemental force of destruction. He is
yeah,
essentially like the balancing factor in the universe. You've got Primus, who is the Transformers god, I suppose,
yeah.
who is Cybertron. He's at the core of Cybertron.
And he's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Unicron's the opposite, and it's a sort of metaphysical, mythical war going on between the two. I mean, that's obviously not in the film. That is,
I don't think he needs an origin though.
nah, it
Just
doesn't really.
it's just this entity that it's bigger than anything you've ever seen. It's absolutely destructive. It doesn't give a shit about one side or the other. It's just hungry and it wants to eat. But there's one thing that's out there that's a threat to it, and it wants that threat removed.
Yeah,
So
I mean
will.
that's another thing. That's another thing. Like all the stuff with the Matrix and all of that.
Yeah.
That wasn't in the cartoon before. Nothing to do with that. That actually derives from the comics. The Matrix was originally a computer program that was in Optimus Prime's head, and
Okay.
it was the computer program that created new Transformers personalities.
That's quite clever. Yeah, the thing is, well, I remember not long after I'd watched that film on VHS, I got a toy of Optimus Prime, the Generation 1 toy. Still got it, it's on my shelf. I was pissed off that he didn't have the Matrix
He didn't
inside
have the
front bit.
Matrix, yeah.
Because it opens up and it
Yeah.
could so easily be in there.
Well,
But now, obviously,
actually-
I know now that toy come out about 3 years before the Matrix was even a thing. So, of course, he didn't come with that. But at the time, I obviously
You were
didn't know
annoyed,
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, most Optimus Prime toys now do come with a matrix. There's
Yeah.
usually a matrix somewhere about their person. But yeah, it wasn't even a thing. It wasn't until the
No.
film wasn't a concept. Wasn't a concept. It just turned up in
I
the
love
film.
that though. I love that idea, and the scene with Rodimus opening it is brilliant.
It is good fun. It is
The
good fun.
music kicks, Sam Bush kicks in while he's opening it, and you see him growing. And
Do you know he
yeah,
actually came to TF Nation last year?
Sam Bush did.
There was a
Nice.
concert. There was a concert and everything. Good fun.
But it's when
Good fun.
he does that, and then it's when he says Autobots transform and roll out, and his voice is a bit deeper, and you can tell that that is such. Again, it's the delivery of the lines. The way he does that line is just immediate goosebumps. If you watch that film as a kid, I mean, I don't know if you did this, but about a few years ago, that film was shown again in some cinemas. And I went to see it in one, and pretty much everyone in there was someone our age.
Yeah, well, they would be. I mean,
when he said that bit, people legitimately cheered. When he says transform and roll out, everyone were like, yeah!
I mean, that's the thing with this film. You've got to kind of like... It's the kind of film where you turn off intellect, really, and you just ride with it. You just go with the weirdness, you go with the absurdity and the bombast and how big and ridiculous it is, and it will carry you. You know, it's got this real swell of emotion all the way through. It like it hits a point of action and then it just doesn't stop. It just carries on, you know.
Have you watched the Doom Patrol series?
I haven't, no.
I would strongly recommend that. But there is a thing with that which is very similar to what you just said, where it is so weird, that show, and it's so bizarre, and there's so many weird stuff that just never gets explained, and it's so unlike anything else. But if you just accept that and just go with it, it's brilliant.
It's
genuinely it's probably the best superhero TV show I've seen in years. It's so daring, and the writing and the acting and everything on it is amazing, but you just have to go with what it's doing and not question it.
That's kind of it, isn't it? And I've got space for that. As long as something is earnest with that and just goes for it, I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. I think there's a lot of fun to be had.
There is one episode on Doom Patrol, which it's a mild spoiler if you don't mind me telling you about it.
I don't mind at all.
It's similar to what you were saying before about how, like with sexuality and stuff, they can do stuff now that they never would have been able to do. So this is in a superhero show, bear in mind. There is a character who was a pilot in the 1940s, and when he was flying really high up, as high as they could get the plane, some entity in outer space, this like energy being, merges with him, completely burns his body, so he looks like a walking corpse, but he survives it, and he basically is imprisoned for like the next 60 years by the government experimenting on him until he gets out and he becomes part of this super team. He, in the flashbacks to when he was a pilot before that happened, he was gay and he was having a secret affair with another pilot. But they couldn't. It's in the 1940s, so they could never, be out there about it.
Of course. God.
He is in the years since he's been free from this imprisonment, he's been trying to get used to sharing his body with this entity who is a conscious entity and can communicate with him. And what he discovers is that when he allows this entity to take over, he slips into like a dream world.
Yeah.
And what he starts happening in the show, there's a whole episode about this, and it's genuinely one of the most moving things I've seen in a drama series for ages, where he is living a life in this dream world with this guy who he was in love with in the 40s. And each time he goes back to this dream world, it kind of carries on where it picks off. So, but they get to have a life as if it was now. So they get to live as if they were gay guys now, and it wouldn't be a problem. So they get to go to restaurants together and be openly gay. They get to get married. They get to have a family. They get to do all of this and live this entire life together. And this spurs him on to find if this guy's still alive.
Right.
So he finds him, and he is about 90 years old now, and he's dying, and he keeps slipping into a coma, and every time he does, he goes into the same dreamscape as So they are genuinely like in this other reality, if you like. They have actually managed to have the life together
That's
that they
brilliant.
never had, and it's so good. I mean, I watched it with Charlie, my girlfriend, and she was just in tears at the ending of that because it's just so beautifully done.
That does sound brilliant. I'm gonna have to look at that.
I mean, that's just one episode of it, but it's just to do that in a superhero show.
Yeah.
And it is just brilliant because by any margin, that is one of the most beautifully and romantic things I've ever seen in a film or drama series. And to just do it in a superhero show and say, it's two men, and you just unashamedly just have it as two blokes like that. You would never have had that in a superhero thing, even 10 years ago.
Oh God, in a suit? No, because there is a slight tendency for some superhero media to be quite conservative in that regard. You know,
stereotypically masculine, stereotypically feminine. Yeah. It's not so much in the comics. They've always been more progressive, but particularly translated to screen.
Well, I mean, when you look at the origins of most superhero comics, the origins are massively progressive, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, the classic is Superman, obviously. Well,
he's an immigrant.
Yes, exactly.
He's an immigrant.
And created by two Jewish immigrants to the US, you know? That's what he's about, you know? Spider-Man has always been a very sort of liberal icon.
Yeah.
You know, always, very much so. I mean, Batman kind of vacillates. It depends on who's writing him. Sometimes he's very arch-conservative. If Frank Miller's writing him, then, you know, he's a bit of a prick, to be honest.
I think that kind of thing, as with Transformers, shows that you can do a lot with this medium if you treat your audience as adults. And I think the acceptance that the people who are into this are older now. Yeah. There's not many, like we came to this when we were like 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
There's not many 5 or 6 year olds now into Transformers.
No.
The new series that are coming out are being watched by people who are our age.
Totally true. And most of the toys are being collected by people who are our age. That's the truth of the matter.
I showed you a picture. I've always been slightly annoyed that the original Generation 1 toys don't rarely look like the robots when they're in robot form.
Very rarely.
Optimus does. Mm-hmm. And I've got a Grimlock that does.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, like, I've always wanted a Galvatron toy, but I never got it because he looks shit.
He looks nothing like the animation model, I can tell you.
No, he doesn't. I've seen it many times. I saw it as a child and didn't want it because he doesn't look like him. But I recently, I sent you a photograph, I recently got a new Galvatron toy that does look exactly like he's supposed to look. And it transforms, and it's brilliant. And he's got the Matrix around his neck as well.
One of the big initiatives in the toys recently has been to make them look more like how people remember them. So like from
transform.
Yeah, from the cartoons, from the comics. So they're not using the designs of the original toys. Because the toys, I mean, they took with the cartoons and with the comics, they took a lot of liberties to make these toys look functional, to make them look. I mean, have you ever seen the original Ironhide and Ratchet?
I had the original Ironhide figure where he didn't have a head. Yeah, he just had a sticker splattered on to give a face.
Well, I mean, obviously you need to bear in mind the original Transformers, the very first Transformers, weren't an original toy line. They come from
they cannibalized a few different things, didn't they?
That's right, from Diaclone, Microman.
Megatron was a one-off on his own, wasn't he? He wasn't part of a set.
That's right. He's from a line called Microman, the same line that Soundwave is from. So they are basically functional objects like cassette players, like guns.
Do you know that Megatron's still on the list of items you can't take on a plane?
Is he? Because he looks like
because it's a gun. It's a metal gun.
It's a one for P-38, yeah.
And it's metal. So it shows up on a scanner.
It looks pretty... When it's in gun mode, barring the Decepticon symbol, it looks pretty convincing.
And if you have that in gun form in your suitcase, it is metal, so your scanners will pick it up. And yes, all right, you'll take it out of the case, you'll show them what it is, and that'll be fine. But the time wasted to do that is genuinely, he's just on a list of stuff you cannot just take to an airport.
I mean,
unless it's like in the box and pre-packaged and
part of the problem they've always had with Megatron down the ages is redesigning him effectively. So
I never understood the size change. There's a scene on the movie where it changes into a gun and Starscream grabs it. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? How does that work?
They really tried. I mean, I call it fan wank. It's where they fan wank it away. So there's like what they call it like mass change basically. So they can like. According to the blurb, they can displace entire portions of their mass so they can shrink
down. Is that where
down.
Optimus's trailer goes?
Yes. It's like Astro Train. You know how in the movie...
that never made sense. He should be about 80 foot tall.
Right, in the movie, for those who don't know what we're talking about, there's a sequence towards the end of like the big battle in the first act of the film.
I had Astro Train, and he's same size as the rest.
Yeah, he's a tiny little bot. But this Decepticon called Astro Train, who turns into a space shuttle and a train, hence the name, he transports all of the Decepticons, and there are a lot of them.
But prior to that, he's fighting alongside him, and he's the same size as them.
He's the same size. It doesn't make a lick of sense. It doesn't make a lick of sense. It's like a TARDIS effect, isn't it?
He suddenly...
But again, it's like Soundwave. You know, Soundwave, the Decepticons' communications officer, turns into, again, betraying our age, a cassette player.
Who's left the 40-foot cassette player outside?
But the thing is, he's not 40 foot. When he transforms, he turns into a human-sized cassette player. So human beings can just pick him up, put him in their pocket, you know. That don't make a lick of sense.
No.
That don't make a lick of sense.
But, not just him, there's that other one. There's the Autobot version in there.
Blaster, who turns into a boombox.
Yeah.
Makes no sense. No,
you just have to accept that. Now, they fix that with Galvatron.
Yeah.
And it now turns into a stationary cannon.
Yes, makes more sense.
That makes perfect sense, that. Yeah.
I tell you were you one of the kids who were absolutely cheering when he finally blasted Starscream to high heaven?
Oh, yeah. But it's such a good death. He just disintegrates him.
It's great, isn't it? So, you know, I mean, befitting a character like Starscream, who had been iconic in the first two seasons. And you know what? Kids, I remember being at school and talking to other kids who like Transformers and saying, why doesn't Megatron just blast him?
Yeah.
Because he's a prick. You know, he's
just like Galvatron's immediately like, no, bang, and that's
it's a good marker that like this version of Megatron, Galvatron,
he's not putting up with his shit.
No, he's done. Yeah. It's like all bets are off now. He's much more ruthless, you know.
Yeah.
It's one of the confusing conundrums of the original show. Like, why does Megatron put up with Starscream?
Yeah, I mean, that's the 80s cartoon thing, isn't it? It's like, we've spoke about this before, I believe, possibly on a podcast, but it's why is Skeletor so, surrounded by idiots? He himself is like a master sorcerer who could... I mean, he has if you go with the comic book line, he has half the power of Grayskull himself.
Yeah.
He could wipe out the entirety of the Masters of the Universe easily on his own,
but doesn't.
Why is he not doing that? And why is he surrounded by these idiots? It's the typical. It's the last boss thing on a video game, isn't it? If he's so hard, why is he sending these Muppets out? Why don't he just do it?
Yeah,
I
know exactly what. Yeah, it is a 1980s thing, but there are moments where. If you watch the very first episodes, which was called More Than Meets the Eye, or if you're in the UK, it's called Arrival from Cybertron for some reason. God knows why they changed it. There is a point where Starscream challenges Megatron, and Megatron blasts him, but not to kill him. And Starscream starts groveling to him, Megatron, don't. And Megatron looks at him, and you're like, yeah, go on, do it, kill him. It's about time, And he doesn't. He turns away from him. And it's like, why didn't you shoot him?
Well, because you're not going to get rid of one of the main characters in the first episode. Of course, that's the real reason.
One of the main toys, that's the thing. It's
I'll tell you what, one of my defining memories from Christmas morning, you spoke about watching this on Christmas morning, is getting Starscream and me and my dad figuring out how to transform him.
Yes, the original.
My dad was a big fan of Transformers, and he used to like watching that film. And I remember about oh, must be about 6 or 7 years ago.
Hmm.
My nephew, who's now about 12 or 13, he was into Transformers, and
Yeah.
I went into Toys R Us. No, it was Smith's Toys with my dad, and we were looking at Transformers for him, the newer
Yeah.
toys. And we could still, and he was naming them all because he remembered me having the older versions of them,
Oh, brilliant! That's
and
so
that was really
cool.
nice. That was really nice.
That
So
is so because of course you can. I mean, now the new lines are really just recreations of the
yes,
originals, but updated massively. So the new Soundwave is gorgeous. The new Shockwave and
I've
Starscream is
got the new
cool.
Soundwave. It's brilliant.
Isn't it good?
I need the cassettes, the
Yeah.
Laserbeak, and oh, let me see if I can remember. There's Rumble,
Uh-huh.
Laserbeak.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another humanoid one, and there's a dog.
There is. Yeah.
I can't remember those two.
There's. I can list them off. There's Laserbeak and Buzzsaw are the two Condors. Rumble and Frenzy are the two
Frenzy, that's
humanoids.
it. Yeah, there's
There's
a dog in there.
Puma, Ravage.
Ravage,
And
that's it.
later
Yeah,
there are a couple of others as well. There was two dinosaurs,
nice.
Overkill and Slugfest, and there were two others that they not only turned into their own little beasties, but they combined to form a big robot.
That's cool.
They were called Squawk, Talk, and Beastbox, and when they fused together, they formed Squawkbox.
Okay.
It's kind of cool. It's
I
kind
need
of
to
fun.
get some of the cassette ones. I like Laserbeak. I remember him. He's on the very first scene of the film.
Yeah, he is, and he's always been like ultimately reliable.
Yeah.
As Laserbeak, he's one of the Decepticons who's pure competence all the way down the line.
Well, he has a simple job and he does it.
He does it well. He does it well. In fact, doesn't Megatron remark, unlike some of my other warriors, you never
Yes, he
fail me.
does, and he lands on his arm instead of sound waves, and yeah,
In fact, there's a sequence in the Marvel comics where Galvatron, again for reasons, they just go with it, just hops back in time basically, and usurps command of that era's Decepticons from Megatron. And one of the reasons the Decepticons end up following Galvatron is because Laserbeak lands on his arm, as he does with
right,
Megatron,
yeah,
and it's kind of like a marker that, like, oh well, this guy's worth, he's worth following.
yeah.
Interesting, eh?
I
Interesting.
liked there's kind of there's a word, I think it's toyetic.
Yeah.
I think Soundwave is particularly toyetic. The idea of, it turns into something and you can put another one in it.
Yeah.
And the headmasters obviously took that and ran with it, didn't they? But Soundwave was the first one where you could get two. Well, you got two tapes with him, didn't you, originally in Generation 1? So you got three in one.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about that as a kid which is really. I mean, not so much now because kids have iPods at age 5, but when we were a kid, if you were being bought an action figure, that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So to get an action figure that's actually 3 action figures.
Oh yeah, that was huge. And to have like that gimmick as well, where you could store the robots in his chest.
Yeah, I love that.
There's
just something beautifully smooth about that, and
I mean, there's a reason why Soundwave he is a fan favorite. Like he is.
You can get an actual cassette radio that's him, Yeah, a friend of mine's got it.
Yeah, there's also an iPod of Soundwave.
That don't work. That's too messy.
And a couple of other things as well, like functional things that actually work. But
that's what you want. I like the clunkiness of a cassette player, Soundwave. It feels like something a robot could be. An iPod's far too smooth and crisp, and it's not the same.
He's kind of sustained down the lines as well. There's usually been a Soundwave somewhere.
What I like about the original designs, as with Soundwave, is that you can see bits of the other form in them.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the tape bit on the front, or those are headlights on his waist. So, you don't get that in the Michael Bay one. They all just look like a massive metal, particularly Megatron. I hate that design.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything for me. I'll be honest. Like the Michael Bay designs, I'm kind of like,
no,
they're all very generic. They all look kind of the same.
Yeah, and it's not immediately obvious what they transform into, and I'm not fond of that. I like being able to see, that was a plane, and that one's,
I mean, it makes you sound like such a bloody ridiculous, weird snob, but there is kind of like a connoisseur thing with Transformers fans, where there is a type of design where the alt mode feeds into the robot mode in such a way. You know what I mean? Where
exactly what you mean,
it's cool, it works somehow. You can see the fluidity of it.
Like the plane ones, the fighter jets, they've got the wings on the back and the guns down the side, and then they kind of flip over and that rotates, and then boom, they set off straight away, and that's brilliantly smooth to watch.
That's it. Yeah. There's a smoothness to it, and that's like the apex of Transformers design when it works that well.
The Michael Bay ones, they just kind of roll into a ball, and what comes out the other end of it is a car. It doesn't have that same smoothness until you get to Bumblebee, which brings that back.
Yeah.
But yeah, the previous Michael Bay films don't have that smoothness of transformation.
I mean, there are a couple of the movie line toys that were never in the film. They're like unique designs that are brilliant. I mean, just stunning. Like there's one, a version of a character who originally appeared in animated called Lockdown, who was played by Lance Henriksen, and looks like him. The actual toy looks like Lance Henriksen, but they did a version of that character in the movie style, and it works so well. If you can find the movie, I think is it Revenge of the Fallen or Dark of the Moon? I can't remember. I think it's Revenge of the Fallen Lockdown. Oh, that's a toy and a half.
What did they do with Hot Rod in them films though?
What, in the Michael Bay ones?
Yeah, where he's French.
I can't even remember, to be honest. I only watched them up to Dark.
Did you not see that? He's like an old military vehicle and he's French.
Oh, really? No, I didn't.
And he's just called Hot Rod. And you know where you just think, why that name? If you wanted to do this as a character, why give it the name of?
Yeah,
because I never understand that this drive to transform characters. It's like, oh, we're going to do a new Spider-Man, but it's a woman and she's an alien and she's got different powers. And you're like, why call it Spider-Man?
Why not
just make a new hero? And I don't get that. I never understand that. It's just like slap the name of an existing character on it and make a new one.
Yeah. I mean, I only watched up to the Michael Bay films, and the only reason I watched them is because, in my job, some of my service users wanted to go and see them. But I only watched up to Dark of the Moon, and Revenge of the Fallen, the one before that, it's one of the very few films in all of history that's actually sincerely given me a headache. Like, I came out of it with a throbbing headache.
Leonard Nimoy was in one, wasn't he?
Dark of the Moon.
Yeah. I remember getting bored in that one. I just remember feeling bored. Now, I love cinema. I love like artistic cinema. I love, like we're talking about action movies. I love that kind of cinema. I love superheroes, horror, everything. I enjoy cinema. I enjoy films.
Likewise.
But very, very rarely do I sit and think, I want this to be done now.
I want it to be over.
Yeah. Well, it becomes like an endurance.
I know exactly.
And I felt it with that one. I just remember the one where Leonard Nimoy's in it, and I remember feeling like I'm done with this now.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's a ball ache. Just to sit there, it's so incoherent, dull. Just there's very little redeeming. There's very little
on and on, and you can't even remember what you've sat through.
I mean, after that one, I said to myself, "Okay, that's it. I'm not watching anymore. This is an insult to me and everybody watching it." So I didn't bother. But I'm reliably informed that the one after that, Age of Extinction, I'm reliably informed that one's worse.
The last one they did is very bad. Very bad. I think it was The Last Night or something it's called.
Oh, Last Night, yeah.
He just doesn't do anything. He just sets things up and then resolves them in 5 minutes, and then nothing really happens, and it's just
The amount of like good actors who are in those films as well, and you're like, what the hell are you doing here? People like Jon Voight and like you're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
John Malkovich.
Yeah, I didn't understand his presence in it. And Kelsey Grammer as well.
I know, I'm like, what? Do you have gambling debts or something? Are you in trouble with the IRS?
How perfectly cast was he as Beast, though, in X-Men?
Oh, yeah, I know, right? I mean, just perfect. Absolute perfection. And then they couldn't do anything with him.
No, but his scenes are worth it just because it's him and he's so perfect. And what I love about the fact that around the same time, David Hyde Pierce did the voice for Abe Sapien in the Hellboy films,
Yes, of
and
course.
something which I so much respect for him for that. He was supposed to be wearing the suit,
Yes.
but he had an allergic reaction to the latex, which a lot of people do.
Yep.
And so Doug Jones did it, and he did the voice. But David Hyde Pierce insisted that Doug Jones was credited as the actor, not him, because he said, all I've done is turn up and read lines. He's done all the work.
Right, that's so
Doug
cool.
Jones, for the first time, as just a stunt actor, he had his name up there as a lead actor because David Hyde Pierce insisted on it.
That's so nice, and Doug Jones bloody deserves it. He is an
does,
amazing
but I love
actor.
that. But what I love about the fact that both of them played heroes is that you can imagine that being the sort of thing Fraser and Niles would argue about.
Yeah.
As who was a better superhero.
Absolutely, yeah. Because they so would.
They absolutely would. Over who gave a better performance.
The better. Oh my god, yeah, absolutely they would.
Yeah, I love that. I just think that's great.
But yeah, I mean, Kelsey Grammer's Beast needed a bit more, like.
Oh, he should have been in more. He should have been in more. There's that scene where they're having a big fight and he's doing really well and kicking everyone's ass, and Wolverine's like, I thought you were supposed to be a man of words, and he's like, well, there comes a time when he even, you know what I mean. He just starts off fighting. But
he is essentially like the 1990s cartoon Beast
he absolutely is
into live action, isn't he?
That's absolutely what they do with him. But that's what I love about, again, what we said before, getting the right actor or the right voice actor, or that it just makes so much difference, because what that entire film is terrible, the X-Men film with him in, but because he's so good in it, it's almost worth watching just for the fact that he's in a few scenes.
You're absolutely right. It's a really good example of how like terrible films can have like that one moment or that one thing about them that's really good. Even more remarkable for me are those very rare films where nothing is good.
Yes,
you know what I mean.
There's nothing worth watching. There's nothing redeemable in it.
But I find the fact that they're very rare. They're very, but they do exist. They do exist. The Room.
I've never watched it, but I've heard
it's amazing. I mean, because it's so bad, because it's like uncannily bad.
I've heard that. It's like confusing how anything can be this bad.
It's amazing because of...
I've got another one for you. There's a film from last year called Wolf.
What, really?
Right. Now, if I tell you the premise for this, you'll think, oh, that sounds all right. Right? Don't let that fool you. It's set during the days of the Roman conquest of Britain.
Okay.
A group of Romans travel into the like northern English countryside to sort of set up camp and stuff, and remove the Picts from that area, and don't come back.
Right.
So another group of Romans go looking for them, and they find some of them are dead. Also there's blood everywhere, and it's the area is like deserted, and basically it's werewolves.
Yeah, it's dog soldiers essentially.
Romans versus werewolves essentially, which you think on the surface of it, you think,
can see how that would work.
Yeah, that works. No, it is a very low budget film that wants to be a big budget film.
Right.
The fact that it's made by a bunch of theatre school graduates and it's somehow got a cinema release.
Right.
So someone's stuck in someone's coat there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of them. As soon as I describe this, you'll know exactly what you're in for.
Right.
The main character in it, who can't particularly act, the main character is also the director, the producer, the writer.
Oh, that's
you got alarm bells ringing there.
Yeah.
So he's brought himself into it, and it's just terrible. And you can do a low-budget film well.
Yeah.
But you've got to understand your limitations, and it's terrible. Everything about it is terrible. The acting, the effects, the werewolves literally are just naked people with sharp teeth. Everything about it is the acting, the dialogue. It just ends in the middle of nothing.
Right.
The everything is just shocking, really shocking. It's like you filmed a bunch of people doing LARPing.
Right. He's okay.
And it's somehow got a cinema release.
Yeah. I mean, that you are absolutely right. When you see writer, director, and star
Yeah.
that's usually massive alarm bells, isn't it? That's usually right. So this is an ego piece, you know.
Yeah, and this is an example to me of what you said, where there's few films that you find where there's nothing
Right.
redeemable about it, and that is one of them for me.
It's
Where sometimes you think, well, that were a shit film, but God, them effects were brilliant,
right,
weren't
right.
they? Or you think, oh, the cinematography was
Yeah. Or
gorgeous,
that
or
scene was great. Or the design of
yeah,
the monster was
oh,
good.
that guy was a particularly good actor, or
Right.
something. But there's
But
nothing at all.
when you get like the vacuum of talent, like anti-talent,
Yeah.
it's incredible, isn't it? It's
It's
incredible,
really
you know.
bizarre to watch because
Yeah.
we are people who grew up in an era before YouTube, before you could just film yourself and put it online, and so there's kind of a quality gate
Hmm.
as to what you expect when you switch on for people our age, when you switch on a film or a TV show. There's a certain level that you kind of expect. But in the modern era, that level of quality has disappeared because anybody can do it.
Hmm.
Anybody can buy filming equipment. Anybody can buy a microphone. Anybody can upload those videos online.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a double-edged sword because, as with self-publishing,
Yeah.
you've got the double-edged sword of anyone can write a book now, but also anyone can
Anyone
write a
can
book
write.
now.
Yeah, it's the
It's the
double-edged
same.
thing of
It's
like,
the same thing. Anyone can make a film and
yeah,
release it, and anyone can make a
yeah.
film and release it.
So what you get is amazing stuff that would never have gotten published because
Yes.
there just isn't a market for it, but amazing work, you know,
Yeah, you get a lot of that, but you
voices,
also get
but
what the hell is this?
exactly, yeah. I mean, you must watch The Room. You've got to watch it. It is like, it's hypnotic. It's so bad. It's like nothing is in place. Nothing works. Even like the stuff in the background. You look at it
Yeah.
and you're like, why is that there? Why is this shot framed like that? Why are the
Yeah,
characters
I've heard
like?
that even the cinematography is bad.
It's so weird.
Everything.
Like, but because of that, it's compelling.
Do
You
you
know,
know what the
like
opposite of that is? I was talking about this the other day with a friend of mine about what you think of as like, can you think of perfect films
a
where
perfect scene. Oh my
everything,
god.
the acting, the cinematography, the music, the way it's edited, everything
Is
is. It doesn't need to be the best film ever,
but
but
pristine.
everything is perfect.
Oh
I've got a
yeah.
couple of examples
I've
that
got a
I
couple.
think of as that.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
One of them is 300.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a very good
Absolutely
film.
beautiful film. You've got to bear in mind when you watch 300, this is somebody telling a story.
Hmm.
The framing device of that is somebody telling a story. So it is talked up, it is romanticized, it is exaggerated. And when you watch it and everything has this golden sheen on it,
Hmm.
and the monster and the elephants look like monsters, and the army's bigger than it could possibly be, and everyone's perfectly handsome and muscled,
Hmm.
when you apply that framing device, all of that makes so much sense.
Hmm.
And everything about it is perfect. The music, the way it looks, is all just like gorgeous Greek tapestries, and it's
Hmm.
everything is brilliant on that film.
Yeah.
You could not improve what that film is. And another example, which is vastly different but equal in the sense that you could not improve any aspect of it, is Forrest Gump.
Ah, Forrest Gump.
It's just perfect. Everything about that film is perfect. There's not anything where you watch it and think, yeah, it would go, but I'd do that differently, or I'd change the soundtrack, or because soundtracks are something that bother me in 90s films
Yeah,
because
it is.
it was the era of just slapping in any old song that were popular at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
But Forrest Gump does not do that. Every piece of music in that film is perfectly chosen, and you could not replace it with any other piece of music. And it's
Actually, I mean, like sticking with the Tom Hanks thing, I think one of a film that like sets out to do a very particular thing and does it absolutely pristinely is Toy Story. Toy
yes, it
Story.
does. Another one,
It's
yeah.
beautiful. I mean, in fact, that whole trilogy is just
Have you
amazing.
seen the fourth one?
I was so shocked by that. I went in really cynical. Like
Same here.
I went in thinking, right, okay, the trilogy's finished. It finished
Yeah,
really well. This is going to be a cash grab, isn't it? You know what? It's
yeah.
brilliant.
It so is. It so is
It's
because
so
it's
good.
not made for kids. That film is
No.
made. There's not much in it that would entertain kids. I don't
How
think.
harsh is it?
It's very sad. It's very much a case of, you know what? Things happen that are bad. Right. You lose toys, you lose friends, you grow up, you forget about things. That's the world.
And also,
it's
like,
so...
life changes. That's what it's about, isn't it? It's like what you want changes, what you think you want changes. And
do you remember the first Disney film that was brave enough to do that? Was Zootropolis.
Oh, no, that's a stunner as well.
There's that scene where the rabbit tries to get the job and fails, and there's that bull who talks to him and he says, what did you think was going to happen? That you turn up here, sing a little song and dance, and all your dreams have come true, grow up.
Yeah,
and
actually...
you're like, wow, that's really...
Yeah, Zootropolis is an underrated classic as well.
It's brilliant. So anti-Disney, despite being a Disney film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, another one that does that, actually, is Ratatouille.
Yeah,
Ratatouille, because obviously the I can't remember his name, but the main character, who's the chef, is crap at what he does. He wants to be a chef so badly, but he's crap, and it's the rat who's actually
most recent one that's just come out, the Onward.
Oh, don't know
that has a very... It's about these two. It's like in a kingdom where, like, if you imagine the world of Lord of the Rings carried on to the modern day.
Right,
so there's elves and dragons and fairies and stuff, but it's now the 21st century.
Okay.
And it's these two characters who are sort of like elves, I suppose. The brothers. One's joined by Chris Pratt and the other is Tom Holland.
Right.
So it's Spider-Man and Star-Lord. And their father dies, and they figure out a way that they can bring him back for one day to speak to him by completing this magical quest, and the whole film is about that. But I'm not going to spoil it because you should watch it. But the ending of that is so not what you expect.
Okay.
And the decisions that it takes, and you're like, holy crap, this is a grown-up Disney film. And it's and as with Toy Story 4, where you just think, they've took some chances here, and this is not what you're expecting at all, and it works for it. I don't think it's aimed at kids, Toy Story 4. I really don't. I think it's aimed at people who were kids when the first one came out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was so shocked at how grown up it was.
Yeah,
like so shocked.
So genuinely emotional and not just in a typical Pixar sort of get your tissues ready sort of way, but in a genuine you think about it afterwards sort of way. And it's I was shocked by that one. I mean, a more recent example of a film which I think is cinematically almost, it's not, there's no such thing as perfection, but it just does what it does so well, The Lighthouse. Yes, very much.
Mesmerized.
Yeah, you couldn't change anything about that film to improve it. Again, for what it is, for what it's trying to do, there's nothing you could alter.
What could you change? You know, there's no like redundancy. There's no, everything works. Everything is germane to what is happening. I found that to be compulsively brilliant. The Lighthouse. I just couldn't. I still think about it now. You know, I could not, like. I kept replaying scenes from it in my head.
Yes, I love that. When again, Transformers the movie has a lot of scenes like that where I can remember the scene shot for shot, and I can remember the words and the music on it.
Obviously, part of that is how old we were, because of course, you know, you're at such an age. That age is so impressionable.
You know what though? I think it's more about the film, because there's a lot of films I watched repeatedly back then, and I still don't remember them to the degree.
You don't remember
it didn't hit me in the same way. Like I used to watch Labyrinth like on a weekly basis. But I don't remember that memorizing. You know, I don't have the memories of that in every single scene, and the music and it doesn't stick in my mind in the same way.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, what I find, because it's because I think I watched Transformers the movie so much when I was a kid.
Yeah,
it is that burning out the VHS thing. You know, it was ingrained. You know, it just sort of like seared itself onto my subconscious, and I can't help but think there must be, because we're both writers. You know, we're both imaginers. There must be something about that that's influenced what we do.
Yeah, for me, I think it's kind of upsetting the balance of good and bad in your stories, in that it's not black and white, and there's a third thing, and then there's, like we said, there's a fourth and a fifth and a sixth race of people, and it's not just the goodies versus the baddies. There's a load of people who don't give a shit about any of that. That's the kind of thing. If my stories are about good and evil, they are always infused with all these characters who are just not a part of that conflict.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to clearly pinpoint like what the influences would be, but I think maybe the style of storytelling, where it is just kind of mental. There's stuff all over the place, and it's weird, and it just like...
Unicron, though, is almost Lovecraftian, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In the sense that it's this like ancient entity that doesn't give a crap about your conflicts or what side of things you're on, and nothing you believe in or whatever is of any relevance to him whatsoever.
Yeah, and he is this sort of ancient enemy thing, isn't he? Where there is like the unknown threat,
Yeah.
Did you ever, I mean, I know it wasn't on the VHS, but I know that the cinematic cut of Transformers the movie had swearing in it.
Did it really? Which scenes?
There's, the scene where Unicron eats Moonbase 2.
Yeah.
And Bumblebee and Spike are on it.
Yeah.
There's the line after they've blown up the moon to try and destroy Unicron, and they think they've done it. They think they're sort of like, oh yeah, and Spike says it isn't even dented.
Yes.
In the cinematic cut, which is actually the cut that's on the DVD, he says, "Oh shit, it isn't even dented."
So that's work. That works. It just gives a bit. Have you seen that Twitter thing where you can add one swear word to any film? Where would you put it?
I love it. Yeah.
My favourite one is on Lord of the Rings with Frodo, with Gandalf, where he says, "All right, keep your fucking secrets."
Yeah, I love it.
It would just change the tone of that so much.
Yeah, so would like present day proper swearing in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Tolkien would not approve.
But yeah, I think that swearing, again, in the 90s, it was something that they just stuck it in everything because they thought it was cool.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing annoys me because you get a lot of that in films like Predator, which on the surface are a brilliant action movie. Yeah. But I think it's aged very badly by the constant swearing just because it's like, yeah, we can swear and it's cool. And it's a bit... But sometimes it's earned if the scene calls for it. And that you are reacting to something sufficiently. Yeah. And I think that one in Transformers that you described, that would have worked.
Yeah,
and with the PG rating, I think they could have gone away with it.
That must have been a landmark as well in children's media, to have like a proper curse word.
Yeah.
In something that is aimed at quite young children, That must have been a landmark, because you did not get that in the 80s. You really didn't. They again, you have to think about like the moral panics that were happening in 1980s culture.
Satanic panic and the anti-metal thing and the video nasties and
Mary
everything.
Whitehouse, the video nasty crusade, the censoring of children's media in general. There was lots. It was, people talk about like censorship now. It was nothing compared to what it was back then. You had entire TV series and film franchises that were being pulled,
Yeah.
Because of the moral panic, because of the video nasty scare. We didn't get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in this country until the 2000s because of the video nasty scare.
Yes, I remember seeing it advertised as like a finally on DVD or whatever it was, VHS, yeah.
What's that about? What the hell is that about?
There's nothing even in it that's that bad, really.
Right. Clearly the people who were in charge of that didn't watch the film because it implies most of its violence.
Yeah, you don't actually see a lot of it.
No, not at all. The Evil Dead was another one, and you see a lot of violence in that, but it's so ridiculous. Surely it's clear that it's trying to be like a comic book thing. It's ridiculous, it's absurd. But there we go. Censorship was massive in the 1980s in this country. It was huge. There were entire political movements based around it. And children's media was well under the spotlight. Yeah,
because they worry about what children are going to be influenced by, and usually unfounded, usually bollocks. Because what I always point out is that if everyone who watched this, if this program is the reason that someone went out with a knife or whatever, everyone who watched it would do that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. There's no foundation.
If 10 million children watch this program and one of them goes into his school with a gun, the problem is not that program.
No, it's as we've discussed before. It's scapegoating. It's simplification.
Yeah.
It's because people want easy answers. It's an easy
Yeah,
answer. That's all.
take that show off the air. That's
Yeah,
easier. Not
yeah.
not gun control. Not talking about how we raise as children.
Right,
not talking about discipline problems. Nah, just take that show off the air. Done. Job solved. Wipe your hands of it. There you go.
It's because the big problems are systemic and they're very.
And then next time we'll blame someone else. So this time we blamed horror movies. Next time it'll be rap music. Then it's Marilyn Manson. Then it's video games. Then
video games, because you had this weird thing happening in the 80s and 90s where like the video nasty scare of the 80s morphed into the video game hysteria of the 1990s. I mean, do you remember, like, I remember distinctly, like, there were documentaries on Channel 4 and on the BBC about how video games did this and did that. And how,
yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
And it was complete bollocks. As we found now, there was no foundation to any of those claims. Like, no, we were lied to a lot as kids, Lex, I'm telling you. A lot. I mean, even like, I mean, this is a very difficult area, but like, do you remember like the hysteria about drugs?
Oh yeah.
The total hysteria that was everywhere.
Do you know what? My entire life, as a teenager and an adult, I have been offered drugs in nightclubs and stuff. I go to a lot of like underground rock clubs.
Right.
And I've had people offer me drugs. At no point has anybody ever tried to force drugs on me.
Right.
What happens is, hey mate, do you want to buy some E's or whatever? And I'll say, no, thank you. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, that's it.
What people do try and force on you is alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely, which is legal.
Because I'm a non-drinker. I'm teetotal. I don't drink. I don't smoke nothing because that's my choice. I don't give it. If you want to drink, fine. I'm not bothered, but I don't. But people, if you're in a group of people who are heavy drinkers and you're not, they have no respect for that at all.
No, it's
so
true.
You say no, thanks. I don't drink. Or just have a beer. What if I'll just get you a Bud Light? I'll just say no. I've said no, thank you.
Yeah.
They do not do that with drugs.
No, it's true.
So they sing on all these adverts and these after-school specials about people forcing drugs on you. It's
complete
bullshit.
Yeah.
It never happens.
But
at
even
all.
even the health scares that were going around were complete bullshit. Don't get me wrong. Yes, if a lot of drugs, some of them are very dangerous. Some of them, if you have underlying conditions, obviously very dangerous. You need to be careful. But a lot of, I mean, we know it's hysteria because things like, for example, you mentioned ecstasy, MDMA.
Yeah.
MDMA is taken all over this country all the time. It's one of the most taken drugs in this country, right, barring alcohol. Yeah. There's hardly any deaths attributed to it. Like
no.
None. There's hardly any. Alcohol, thousands.
I'm a big fan of legalizing drugs and regulating it.
Me too.
So put stuff on it like you can't drive if you've done it. Yeah, and obviously, if you got done taking it at work or if you turned up to work high, you'd get in trouble. Totally. Just like you would if you turned up drunk.
Totally.
Just apply rules and regulations to it. And then there you go. Because people are going to do it anyway. The war on drugs has undoubtedly failed. And I said this as someone who's teetotal, so I don't even do it. This isn't a selfish thing to make my life easier. I won't benefit from it in the slightest. But I just think on principle, just stop being so stupid. People do it anyway. You might as well legalise it, regulate it, remove the amount of time the police and the courts have to spend on it. Just make it the same rules as alcohol. You can't drive, you can't go to work, you can't operate machinery when you've done it. But otherwise, let people go into Boots and buy a pack of spliffs just like they do cigarettes.
Right.
Just do that. Why the big faff with it?
It is that thing I've always said, like, I don't understand why. I mean, I'm not a big drinker, I'm not a big drugs taker either. But I don't understand why I could come home from work and drink myself to death. If I wanted to. I could, if I wanted to. If I came home and had, like, a tab of MDMA over the weekend, or smoked a marijuana cigarette, then I could be arrested and my entire life could be destroyed,
It's insane. It makes no sense at all. Makes no sense.
Especially when you consider the ambient effects. So look at alcohol. Alcohol has a tendency to make people aggressive. It has a tendency to cause lots of social problems. Marijuana, there's no way you could be aggressive on marijuana. There's no way. MDMA is the same. It makes everybody so interesting.
Yeah, you
You
see,
love
the problem with
people.
alcohol is a bit. Alcohol. What Chris Rock said this on one of his stand-ups, which is brilliant. He said, "Alcohol's so dangerous it kills fuckers who don't even drink,"
Right, yeah, absolutely. It's a fair point. It's a
and it's
fair
true. You
point.
can't get away with
I
that.
mean, like MDMA, ecstasy, that makes you love everyone.
But he also follows that up with one of my favourite lines in a stand-up routine. He's talking to the audience, and he says, "Some of y'all won't even make it home tonight because of alcohol,"
Right, yeah.
which is shocking, but
But
statistically, he's
kind
probably
of
right.
true. Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. We were lied to a lot. I remember
Yeah,
those, I remember the adverts, I remember the cartoons, I remember those pamphlets they used to give out in schools.
yeah.
Complete bullshit.
I think ultimately it's because with drugs that aren't alcohol, the wrong people would get rich
Yeah, yeah, it's
from
true.
making it. If you
That's true.
legalised it, the wrong people would make and get rich off it. That's why.
There's also a very sinister aspect to it, which is of course the privatized prison system,
Yeah,
which requires constant turnover, and the raw
which drugs
fact.
provide.
Yeah. You know what? People who are taking marijuana are really easy to arrest
Yeah.
because they ain't gonna resist. I can tell you
No, and they're not
that.
hardened criminals either, are
No,
they?
no,
So, yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's to bring police statistics up. It's to keep the private prison system turning over. That's
I've
the
always
truth.
there's stuff like that where they're like, "Oh, we've arrested X number of people this year," as if that's a celebratory thing. And I always
Right.
think, what have you arrested them
Yeah. What
for?
for?
Yeah,
That's the
I don't want to
thing.
know. If it's people who haven't paid the council tax and smoked a spliff, I'm not that impressed.
I'm not
If you're telling
impressed.
me that
No.
it's 500 murderers and rapists and paedophiles, then I might give you a round
Great.
of applause.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's people who
Absolutely.
smoked a couple of spliffs or missed the council tax payment, I don't really think that's worth
No,
celebrating.
I'm totally with you. Totally with you. But yes, I mean, slight deviation. But do you? What are your closing thoughts? What I mean, Transformers the movie. I mean, what
Yeah,
is it to you, man?
I legitimately think it holds up as a good film.
Yeah.
Because there is such a thing as a nostalgia effect, where if you watch the film at the right age, you now look back on it fondly
Yeah.
because you watched it at that age.
Yeah.
I have an example of that, two examples of that myself: Flash Gordon and the Super Mario Brothers film.
Super Mario Brothers, bloody hell.
Both of those I watched at an age where I was so into stuff like that that I adored it, and even now I will watch it and enjoy it. But I'm aware that they are bad films. And if I watched it now, having never seen them, I would think they were shit.
Yeah.
I don't think you can say that about Transformers the movie. I think it is legitimately a good story. It's beautifully animated. The voice acting, as we've been raving about, is wonderful. The music is perfect. It is legitimately a good film, and not just through rose-tinted
Not just through like
glasses.
the rose-tinted goggles.
Yeah,
No, I mean,
I genuinely would defend it on that point.
it is very much of its time, obviously. It is, but for me, that's its strength. It is like the 80s crystallized. It's just made manifest. And being an artifact of childhood, obviously, it does have lots of triggers and associations that are very, very pleasant. But yeah, I mean, I can watch it now as an adult. I like yourself. There's a lot of stuff I from my childhood I can't watch anymore. It's just so bad. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
But Transformers the movie, I enjoy. A lot about it. There's just stuff in it that it triggers everything, just something very pleasant in my mind.
Yes, you get that thing where you get excited when a bit's coming up, even though you've seen it so many times.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, it's
like,
absolutely true.
Hot Rod opening the Matrix is one of them.
Yeah, it's true.
He shoots it out. Galvatron shoots it out of his hand. It scatters on the floor. He's strangling him. He knocks him away. He picks it up. Galvatron's tried to open it. Ultra Magnus has tried to open it. It seems impossible to do, and then he does it. And you hear Optimus's voice, and it's like, yes, it's just perfect.
There are some very clever little touchstones all the way through, aren't there? Things like the reformatting of Megatron is one of them. The transformation of Unicron is one of them.
Beautifully animated. It's so well detailed.
That is a brilliant sequence, sincerely brilliant. And it's like, oh, he's a transformer, right?
And
okay.
Orson Welles, as a final point on that, yes, whatever he might have thought about it, he does not phone that in at all.
Nah, he's
so good in that role. He gives that everything as much as any other role he did. He takes that seriously, and he puts a proper effort into that. It really does.
It's good fun. I mean, it is, and that's the other thing. It's just good bloody fun. It's a very good communal film.
Yes,
You get some mates round. Oh, it's a brilliant communal film, especially if they've got sort of common experience. You know.
Yeah.
It's a very good communal film to watch. I mean, one of the things they often do at TF Nation is a screening of Transformers the movie. That the atmosphere in the room is great. Obviously.
I bet it is.
It's really good. My only hope from now is that we get some better Transformers visual media. The comic books are great. The comic books are going from strength to strength. You know, the comic books are really, really good. But the visual media, it had some high points. Beast Wars, Beast Machines, and Animated are fantastic. They're genuinely brilliant. Well worth checking out. Prime is very good. There's a lot of crap. There's a lot of really
the Bumblebee
stuff.
film makes me think if they carry on with that style, then they might actually be okay. Yeah. They might be better than what's come before.
You know, what I would really like to see is another good series. I would like to see another good animated series, but there hasn't been one for a long time, unfortunately. And Siege isn't it. The Netflix one, it's just not it. It's too flat. It just doesn't have the, it doesn't have the gravitas. Yeah. It doesn't have the feeling and the emotion. It's just too flat. But the fact that you can go back and watch Transformers the movie makes me very happy. Very happy.
It's always there.
Yeah. So, I mean, thanks so much for coming on to talk to me about it.
Thank you.
It's been nice to have a bit of Transformers input on, after, obviously, TF Nation didn't go ahead. It's been nice to have it, yeah?
Yeah, very much, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lex. Is there anything you'd like to pimp out to the ladies and gentlemen?
Not at the moment. It's been a quiet year for me, writing-wise, for everyone. That's for everyone, I believe.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I will put links below to The Other Side of the Mirror and to The Old One in the Sea.
So yes, of course. Thank you.
If you're interested, if you like sort of noir fiction with a metaphysical edge to it, like a sort of horror metaphysical edge, you'll love The Other Side of the Mirror. And if you like traditional children's books but with a slightly Lovecraftian bent, you'll like The Old One in the Sea.
Yeah, but very unusual ends of the spectrum there. But
yeah, slightly unusual ends of the spectrum. For myself, it's the usual, ladies and gents. Find me knocking about here on Exaggerated Elegy, where you'll get podcasts like this, you'll get Let's Plays, you'll get reviews, you'll get all sorts of stuff. Doing my Dark Tower retrospectives at the moment, which is lots of fun. You can purchase my fiction over at strangeplaygrounds.com. 3 short story collections out there at the moment. 4th one incoming, after all of the COVID-related chicanery. And look out later this year. There's going to be a collection of LGBTQ short stories that has one of mine in it. The Unburied, I believe it's called. I will put links up to that eventually when it comes out. And if you want to chat, come and grab me over at Enigmatic Elegy on Twitter. So, until next, thank you, Lex, by the way. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Until next time, guys, bye-bye.
Bye.